Good evening, councillors and staff, ladies and gentlemen, and those watching at home. Welcome to our agenda forum. Agenda forums are specifically for agenda items which are to be considered by the council at the next ordinary meeting of council. Agenda forums are not a decision-making forum. They provide an opportunity for councillors to be equally informed and seek additional information on matters prior to the presentation of such matters to the next ordinary meeting of council for formal consideration and decision. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed. The recording will also be archived and made available on the council's website after the meeting. If you choose to participate in the meeting during public question time and deputation time, it is assumed that your consent is given for the audio to be recorded. Please keep your comments respectful to the council and other members of the community. Visual images of the public will not be captured. Attendance and apologies, Mr. CEO.
Mr Mayor, we have apologies from Councillor Predovnik this evening.
Okay, Councillor Jones and Councillor McCulloch are running late. Any leave of absence?
No, none.
None. Declarations of financial and proximity interest and interests affecting impartiality.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have a few this evening. The first one is from yourself, Mayor Bailey, in relation to item C3.6, which is a State Administrative Tribunal, and that is for the reconsideration of proposed use and associated development for the Artificial Insemination Centre Lot 1780 of Gaston Road in Bullsbrook, and that's a financial interest. Councillor John McNamara for 5.5, which is the Slip Lane petition, which is a financial one. Councillor Kiley for 4.8, addition to the existing restaurant Stirling Street in Guildford, and that's an impartiality interest as an executive of the Guildford Association. For Councillor Zanino, item C12 and 8.1, which is Councillor Johnson's proposed amendment to Structure Plan and Subdivision Midland Oval Redevelopment Master Plan, impartiality interest as previous business partner and owned land on the Crescent in Midland. We have from staff declarations of interest from the Executive Manager, Mr Coaten, in relation to 7.1, which is the CEO Recruitment, Performance Review and Termination Standards and Policies. A financial one, as an Executive Manager, he will act as the CEO. Similarly, on that item for Executive Manager Leon Vanderlyn, and the same reason, 7.1, CEO Recruitment, Performance, Termination Standards and Council Policies, financial, as the Executive Manager may act in that role. Also, Executive Manager Mark Bishop, in relation to 7.1, the item again is the CEO Recruitment, Performance Review and Termination, financial interests, as the Executive Manager will act in the role as CEO. And also from Executive Manager Kim Leahy as well, in relation to 7.1, CEO Recruitment, Performance Review, Termination and Policies, Executive Manager, Financial Interests, who will act as the CEO and receive high duties. And also myself for item 7.1, the CEO Recruitment, Performance Review and Termination, Financial Interests. As a CEO, I have the financial interest in the performance review process.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Any further declarations from either staff or councillors? Councillor Richardson. CEO, we have one from Councillor Richards, 4.8 being
additions to the existing restaurant cafe, 194 and 7 Street.
It's impartiality. Okay. Anything further?
Yes.
Councillor Catalano. Okay, so you've got in, which one? C1? C1.1 or 1.2? And your interest is financial or impartiality? What's the interest you're declaring impartiality?
Member of the group.
I may have commented. Okay. Okay, thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I've got a proximity interest regarding motion 4 in item 8.1, consideration of the annual meeting of electors.
Okay. Any further declarations? Thank you. Now move to public question time. Questions relating to reports contained in the agenda. 5.1, questions which due notice has been given. I have nil. 5.2, questions without notice. Now there are questions from Mr Alan Jenner. Mr Jenner, you're here. I believe you received those answers to your questions.
Yes, I have. I received them, but they've got some issues with those answers. I tried to do the right thing by providing questions up front to provide time to get the answers back, but that was after the 10 o'clock deadline, and I've now got these responses back which basically gloss over the whole problem. Rather than go through every single one, if I may.
Well, you got any further questions on them?
The first question, well, this question number 1, the George Street was in error. That makes me think perhaps that the actual document has been copy and pasted in places. The impact on number 2, the crossover dimensions basically is not complying with the City of Swan's own guidelines on crossover requirements. Number 3, what is meant by which will require consideration? The answer to that one basically says, and it's discussed at length, so it's not compliant because it doesn't comply to the R codes nor the deemed to comply. Number 4, how much is slightly more? It says the top portion of the peak roof, but in the actual body it mentions a setback of 1.5 metres. Well, we're not talking about 1.5 metres here. We're talking about 0.15 metres. There's a huge difference. Question number 6, with the exception. If you've got an exception, it can't meet the requirements, so it's not compliant. The final drawings that were devised or put together by Mr Taylor, the question I have these discrepancies, as the answer there's identified discrepancies, have these discrepancies been taken into account? Further, still not meeting the requirements of the R codes or the deemed to comply. As I said, the fence to shed now shows a 0.15 metre, which it was a 0.35 metre, and it should be a 1.5 metre, so it's not compliant with the R codes. And again, not compliant with the R codes. And the final question there of number 9, I'm pleased that the Planning Department have put processes in place to make sure that the large outbuildings are not put together, not approved. But I need basically a question answered. What's going to happen to that outbuilding that's listed, that very, very big one that's on the other road in Netterton? That's my questions.
Mr Russell or Mr Van Lien, can you answer that?
Through Mr Mayor, are you referring to the gentleman's question as to the other outbuilding? Yeah, no, I take that on notice, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr Jenner. We note your comments.
Yeah.
Well, you've got questions of staff coming up then.
No, I've got a question for Mr Jenner.
Well, no, it's not questions to him. Mr Jenner does have a deputation later on.
Oh, well, I'll ask him then.
Thank you. That takes us now to reports and motions to which previous notice have been given. Deputations in accordance with procedures of public participation in agenda forums. All written deputations received by 3 p.m. Tuesday the 6th of April were provided to councillors with the preliminary schedule. Deputations received after this time were circulated to councillors prior to the agenda forum. Time allocated for deputations will be 90 minutes. Deputations for all items will be provided 3 minutes to address council and approximately 5 minutes to provide to councillors to ask questions of deputies following the deputations on each item. All questions are to be required to be directed through the presiding member. In this way, we are mindful of members of the public in attendance and deal with all deputations in a timely manner and allow time for parts of the questions meeting to be conducted. We now move to Part A, which I have nil. Part B, we move to 13.3, outbuilding shed, lot 505, number 29, Oldswater Chase, Averley. And first up is Mr Alan Jenner, speaking against the staff recommendation. Mr Jenner's provided a written deputation, and obviously here, Mr Jenner, you've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank councillors for giving me time to talk on this topic. Councillors, I need to bring to your attention, this has been going on for 6 months now and still hasn't had a resolution. I need you to be, hopefully you've got in your packs the initial submission. You should also have a report detailing why that report there, detailing why that shouldn't go ahead, that report. You should also have an email that was written by me in response to a letter we received by Mr Blake Eldridge. That email you should have there in your packs, which basically outlines issues where the whole thing doesn't add up again. The third proposal that has numerous errors, omissions, alterations to the initial drawings, which you should find in your pack. These are covered in deputation emails to Council on Monday, 5th of April at 8:16 p.m. in response to an email extract for the reasons second proposal. Councillors, you have all these documents before you. I strongly urge you to read them all so you can make an informed decision later on. Basically, if you haven't read them, then you can't make an informed decision. I'd like to provide you with a bit of an analogy. The road traffic code, and I take it everyone drives here, states you must stop at a red light. The residential design code state you must have a 1.5 metre boundary setback for a 9.5 metre outbuilding. There's a must and there's a must. The road traffic code doesn't give the option of looking left and looking right and then travelling through a red light deemed to comply. The same thing, the residential design codes must have a prescribed boundary setback, not a deemed to comply. It says must. So bear that in mind. Councillors, this issue has been going on back and forth far too long without any resolution because the outbuilding workshop doesn't meet the prescribed standards, despite what the planning department is trying to have you believe. It doesn't meet it. 9.5 metres, as far as the code says, should have a setback from the boundary of 1.5 metres, not 0.15 metres. I urge you to fully read the full suite of documents so that you can make an informed, beyond reasonable doubt decision based on fact and within the rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Jenner. If you'd like, councillors, questions after the deputations. Thank you, Mr Jenner. Take a seat. There will be questions for you shortly. Mr Liam McLaughlin, speaking against the staff recommendation. Thank you, Mr McLaughlin. You too have 3 minutes. Thank you.
I'd just like to thank the councillors for giving me the time to talk on this topic. I just want to remind the councillors of the issues with the application that was presented to council 6 months ago in November. The application presented does not meet the design principles and deemed to comply provisions set out in the R codes. The shed does not meet the max wall height requirement of 2.4 metres set out in these R codes. Instead, has a wall height of 3.05 metres. The shed does not meet the setback requirement of 1.5 metre from the boundary wall. Originally, this was set at 350 mil. This is now changed to 150 mil away, thus only increasing the distance in which this shed does not comply with. The shed did not meet the requirements in the design principles to reduce building bulk and overshadowing. This is not met due to the wall height and setback from the fence. All of this was mentioned 6 months ago and was highlighted as a major issue, and nothing has changed except the shed now being closer to my boundary, creating greater building bulk and overshadowing, and the addition of a crossover. Since the November Agenda Forum, we have pointed out to City of staff who overlooked these applications that the shed requires a crossover and also required knowledge of the location of soak wells, both of which were without our input would not have been known. It has taken both my neighbour and I to point out to your own city staff and head of planning of how the R codes must be interpreted, as they have failed on numerous occasions to do so. The city staff has ignored their own specification for crossover construction, which can be easily accessed on the City of Swan website, including the crossover application, which must be completed, stating that stating that second crossovers cannot be built within 3.5 metres of street trees and 0.5 metres of electrical equipment. The second crossover will be built within the area of 3 street trees. This is all pointed out in our reports and deputations to Council. All this shows that there are major flaws not only in this application but the way city staff go about dealing with these types of application. It was already admitted to my neighbour and I, as you can see in the report in January, that City of staff have approved sheds, including the shed mentioned in the November Council meeting, that was wrongly approved. Now the neighbours are having to deal with the incompetence of the city and the stress these sheds are causing when they should not have been approved. Nothing in the application has mentioned the impact of property value on my property. A local real estate agent has informed me that a shed of this size and magnitude running the length of my own property would have great impact on my property value, resulting in a smaller buyer pool and loss of monetary value. This has been left out of the application by city staff. I reiterate that I do not see how, for a shed that does not meet either the design principles or the deemed to comply requirements set out in the art codes and the City of Swan's own specifications, should be allowed to construct at the expense of neighbouring property values. We also do not have any conclusive information on the location of 3 soak wells. The site plan shows 3 soak wells, all of which are currently located under a concrete slab. Then 2 soak wells are drawn in red depicting their apparent location. How do we know this location without any proper plans? And why is there only 2 when 3 were previously required?
Thank you, Mr McLaughlin. That's your 3 minutes.
Yep.
I can take a seat. We'll be back to you shortly, I guess. Next speaker is Mr Stephen Taylor, the applicant, speaking in support of the staff recommendation. Thank you, Mr Taylor. You've got 3 minutes.
Thank you for your time. Like my neighbours have said, this has been going on for a while now. No real resolve decision yet. I believe in my area, like smaller blocks, narrower blocks, smaller frontage. Never in my wildest dreams I would have had a issue trying to build a hobby workshop on my property. I have received an email from the City of Swan, and option 1, council may resolve to grant approval to the variations of 2 deemed to comply requirements of the R codes. I totally agree with that option 1, and there's not much more to say about it because it's out of my hands really. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Taylor. All right, councillors, we've got a bit of extra time for questions here. So, Councillor Catalano, you were first, of Mr Jenner.
Yes, thank you. You mentioned outbuilding that's already been built or accidentally been built.
Yes.
So where is that? Sorry, you know your package that you're talking about, by the way, I don't actually have a copy of it.
You don't have package?
No.
Oh, okay,
so
well,
it might be a good idea, if you don't mind, to email it. Could you email it to us?
It was all part of my submission, or that I submitted on Monday night. So there's a whole batch of information which is that there that I put together back in December.
Can I just interrupt you there?
Sure.
Can I just ask whether we actually did get a copy of that email sent to us?
Just checking now.
Oh, thank you. So we're just checking to see that.
Yeah, sure.
So anyway, I've got before me is the proponent's map. So where on that map is this other shed that
This other shed's across the other side of the lake. Now, this is the shed that the Mayor used in his speech to say that it set precedents. And what I'm trying to say here is this shed was approved in error, and so therefore that statement that was made to set precedent should be taken away from that record. That is the one there.
Where is that shed, sorry?
Netterton?
Oh, it's not on this property, the next door neighbour's property?
No, it's across the road. But what I'm pointing out the fact
okay,
is
so that's just saying
approved,
that's...
Gotcha. Which should never have been approved.
I understand.
The
right.
concern is that this is going to be approved and it should never be approved.
It's another one of those.
Because of the size.
All right, thanks. Yeah.
Because of the 9.5 metres that's going to stick directly onto a fence line.
Yes.
So you come out to your back of the house.
Yes.
And you're confronted with this massive, great big wall of a shed.
Yes, 9.5 metres long.
9.5 metres long. So your visual amenity.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay, great.
All right.
Thanks for that. Now, did we know about the...
We're just checking it. Councillor Coley,
Still
you're next.
Just seeking the submission, Mayor, through you. I've got a question for the applicant in respect to, he mentioned it was for a hobby workshop, and I'm not...
Has anyone got any more questions of Mr Jenner? Thank you, Mr
no.
Jenner. Mr Taylor, there's questions of you.
Thank you. You mentioned that you had it was just for a hobby workshop. I'm interested in, it's an application for a shed. I'm just personally interested what sort of hobby you were thinking of carrying
that's
out.
correct. I'm a bit of a hobbyist at home, pretty much. At the moment, I'm just building a car for my family. I've got a 5-month-old son. Building a family car, pretty much. Somewhere to service the car, somewhere to teach my son, to learn how to use his hands, pretty much. Bit of extra storage.
Yeah, so effectively a workshop.
Effectively a workshop, small workshop.
Any further questions of Mr Taylor or any of the other deputies? Thank you, gentlemen. I now move to item 4.5, the Bellevue East Land Use Study Review. And Ms Diane Arvino from the Bellevue Resident Ratepayers Association speaking in support of the staff recommendation. Thank you, Ms Arvino. You've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr Mayor, Mr CEO and councillors. The Bellevue Residents and Ratepayers Association support Bellis and thank staff for bringing the review to the council. This is a very large document and does require further consultation with the city, including with councillors, so a deferral to the next meeting would be preferable. But initially, we have some points where we request amendments. So Precinct 1.4, prepare and implement a verge landscape plan for Bellevue Road. We would like this amended from complete to outstanding, as no trees or landscaping has been planted in front of industrial properties opposite residential homes in Bellevue. And with most of the precincts, it says prepare and implement a verge landscape plan. So we would like that amended from complete to ongoing, as although 133 trees were planted, Bellevue has 700 plus houses and had approximately 450 treeless verges, and now 30 to 40% are planted. This recommendation was changed into tree by request in 2019 instead of a uniform rollout as advised to the BRRA by Swan liaison staffers at earlier public meetings. A uniform rollout did happen at Clayton Street East with 34 trees, 2017, with no issues or resident consultations. Minutes and CEO statements in press note Bellevue was promised an open space and streetscape upgrade with funds from the controversial sale of the Good Child Oval in Bellevue for $1.6 million in 2011. In summary on this point, we request Council to clarify the Bellevue streetscape upgrade to reflect the original intent of Council, which we believe was not a tree by request, which was predictable in the result and did not deliver a uniform streetscape upgrade. Precinct 6.8 Helen Street, amend from complete to ongoing. Only 8 out of a possible 18 trees have been planted. There are other issues in this precinct about contaminated land. Precinct 6 Todd Park improvement, amend from complete to ongoing because Bellevue does not have a park at all and efforts should continue to rectify this. Our last communication advised by the city will consider future water allocations as part of irrigation audit. Lighting audit, we have not been told the results of the lighting audit. Noise attenuation speaks about conditions for new developments. We believe... we believe Bellis was referring to existing properties. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Ms Arvino.
If you didn't hear, did you miss it all?
No, we've got it. It was just a bit faint, that was all.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Any questions, councillors? Councillor Coley?
I just ask through you, Mayor, that you send out those changes in an email to at least your ward councillors, Di.
I actually have got some extra copies here if you wanted to.
Any further questions,
pass them
councillors?
out. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms Arvino.
Mr Mayor. Could we ask her to speak on 8.1 as well? Since she's going to be here for an extra half hour, might as well.
That would be great if I could.
Yeah, that's certainly a good idea. That saves you waiting around all night.
Okay.
So 8.1.
Thank you.
Ms Arvino wishes to speak on motion 11 from the electors meeting.
And thank you for allowing me to speak on that. I did come to the electors meeting late and I missed most of it. So the motion was one tree for every verge. And I believe if the council is serious about increasing tree canopy, a tree on every verge should be an important part of any strategy. Currently, the policy of tree by requests and residents must water, combined with residents must water, only results in about 10 trees per year planted, where we need hundreds per year, culminating into thousands over a 10-year period. And I'm just referring to existing residential properties and commercial properties, not new developments. Even when residents are directly asked, as by my experience with the Bellevue tree planting in 2019, of 168 letters, only 12 responded and 15 trees were planted, asking people if they wanted a tree, but they would have to water it. Conversely, in 2017, 34 trees were planted and watered by the city on Clayton Street East in a rollout with no consultation, and there was only one complaint because of line of sight, which was addressed. This clearly contradicts the staff comment that there is lower success rate where residents are not in support. It is accepted that there is a natural resistance by some residents to street trees, but there continues to be a growing push by Walga and recently the new local government minister urging councils to plant street trees. Walga provides education on rolling out planting programs and dealing with objections such as it will drop leaves or can't use the verge for parking. I did a survey of many local government councils. I think I rang about 15 and emailed, and the majority have a new policy that certainly does not require residents to water trees, as they are a council asset. Some, like Stirling, even have a policy of one tree per 500 square metres in any development, as well as mandatory street trees. It is time our council reviewed the City of Swan street tree policy, as this is clearly outdated and showed leadership for the greater good. In the meantime, a condition of every new development, residential or commercial, there should be a requirement of a mandatory street tree. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms Arvino. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Yes, Ms Arvino, I guess the question we've got is, or I have is, I think what you're saying is that the sale of the Good Child Oval, which was controversial, released funds, and are you saying that those funds should be used to provide the street trees? Is that part of the thinking? I know you didn't say that, but...
Okay, that was in the Bellis review.
Yeah, but is that also
yes,
a
it
rationale?
does tie in. Well, yes, the way it was implemented was not how we were led to understand. We had a staffer come to a public meeting, show us, they did the plan, they did the landscape plan, and said there's going to be a rollout of trees with the city paying for the trees and the maintaining of the trees for 2 or 3 years. Then it suddenly changed, well, not suddenly, some years later, because we were waiting for drainage to be complete. Then it changed to, they went and asked everybody if they wanted a tree, and there was an obvious result with that. Everybody knows what happens with that. Everybody's got a different idea. So, yeah. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms Arvino. Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Ms Arvino. How many trees are we talking about here needing in total?
At Bellevue?
Mm.
Okay. 133 plus 40, 170 odd were planted. Probably another 200 to 250. But there is a problem now, public relation problem, because each resident has been asked about 3 times if they wanted a tree. So now they feel like they've got a say. So only about 30 to 40% has been planted.
Of that 200 and 250 that you need? Want?
More. So the ones the big gaps, it's going to be difficult to fill them unless council makes a policy makes a different policy, changes the policy, because people will actually take notice of a new policy, but with the current policy, we won't be able to proceed to finish the landscape upgrade in Bellevue.
Ask a question through staff.
Yep, you can raise staff questions at the end, Councillor. We have
Thank
the
you.
opportunity for staff. Thank you, Ms Arvino.
Okay.
Now move to item 4.6, which is the Bradman second stage local structure plan. And Mr Craig Rayner from Pete. Craig. In support of the staff recommendation, Mr Rayner, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Nice. Good evening. My name's Craig Rayner. I'm the project director for the Bradman project for Pete. I'm joined by Steve Carter from CLE and Jason Hick from Emerge to discuss the Bradman second local structure plan. As a presentation was circulated prior to the meeting, and in the interest of time, I'll hand over to Jason initially to discuss the key issues surrounding the wetlands, and then we'll get on to we can talk at the kangaroos after that, pending time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Just to check, does everyone have a copy of the presentation that was circulated? Is that a no? Might make it a little more challenging than what I thought, but just in terms of talking through some key points in relation to the northern wetland buffer, if you do have the presentation, I'm starting on the first page of the presentation, which says northern wetland buffer. The first key point we wanted to, I suppose in going through this, we wanted to just clarify maybe what have been some misconceptions in terms of the assessment of the wetland and the wetland buffer. And the first point we wanted to raise is the current DBCA mapping for the resource enhancement wetland in the north is incorrect, and through the assessment supporting the structure plan, the proponent has actually broadened the base of the wetland. But if we had stuck with the currently mapped resource enhancement wetland, it would have resulted in a much lesser buffer and a much lesser extent away from the current wetland boundary. What we've actually done further to that, the detailed site mapping, is first of all picked up what we believe to be the full extent of the wetland. Under the DBCA mapping, we would have had half of the wetland vegetation actually in the buffer. And then we've sought an approach in the LSP documentation to generally provide a 50-metre buffer. And I think there was a little bit of confusion in the assessment of the document, is that it's just 30 metres of the wetland buffer will be fully revegetated with locally occurring endemic native species. The wetland buffer varies in width, but it has been generally aimed to accommodate 50 metres. Some of the constraints that have been tried to be accommodated in terms of the geometric shape of the buffer around the wetland is an existing, well, particularly on the western side, there's an existing road reserve that the road network needs to connect in with, and on the eastern side of the wetland there's an existing but unconstructed road reserve which has been used to connect into Henley Brook Avenue. So while there have been some existing constraints, the general approach has been to accommodate a 50-metre buffer. 30 metres of that buffer is fully revegetated, and then there is an edge to that which will be landscaped to provide a more amenable interface and a broader range of uses in that wetland buffer, which is totally consistent with current state government policy. Then just on to St Leonard's Creek and setbacks from St Leonard's Creek. I just wanted to start with clarifying what is the basis of waterway setbacks, and it goes back to the Commission's open space in residential areas policy, which basically says the required width of a foreshore or coastal reserve varies according to the size of the watercourse or body of water and the condition of its banks, shore or coastline. As a general rule, in the case of a river or lake foreshores, a reserve of 30 metres width is required, but each application is examined in detail, where, for topographical or other reasons, such as protection of a floodway, a greater or lesser width is considered necessary or desirable in the public interests, such a width may be specified. Now, I just wanted to clarify, that's exactly what's been done in relation to the St Leonard's Creek waterway setback and provision of open space in the structure plan. And the St Leonard's Creek is a really well defined feature that runs through the structure plan area. The original DSP considerations were framed around the location of what was a drain, an artificial drain, and a 30-metre setback to a drain. What has been done, like with the wetland assessment, has been a detailed site-specific assessment of the location of the St Leonard's Creek banks, and that has been picked up and basically been the basis to then determining what is an appropriate position to work back from a setback.
I've allowed you a full 2 minutes over time, so I wouldn't mind if you wrap it up there so we've got time for some questions. Councillors, be aware that this presentation was emailed at 4:49 to all councillors yesterday, and the previous item we spoke about was Mr Alan Jenner's was emailed yesterday at 4:18 p.m. So
in my apologies, probably made it a little harder without being able to reference the slides.
So councillors, if I could take some questions, please. Councillor Coley.
Thank you for the deputation. Penarge Wetlands, having been there, it seems to flow down to St Leonard's Creek. Although there's planned, you've got housing in the way of where the water tends to flow. I mean, can you explain where the wetland water from Penarge goes to if it's not going to St Leonard's?
It is, and it's a great question. Thanks. We're probably leading to my next point. Is some areas of the wetland buffer have been extended to be considerably beyond 50 metres to retain additional vegetation that is in really good condition, but also provide a green linkage between the wetland and St Leonard's Creek. Now, part of that is provided in the wetland and wetland buffer, and then part of that is provided in a green strip to a road reserve. And basically the local water management strategy that has been prepared for the whole structure plan allows for that continuation of water movement from the north to the south to St Leonard's Creek.
Can I just ask how the water gets from the north to the south? Is it you piping it, or how?
A combination of overland flows from road reserves to a pipe network through to movement through green space through that green spine or green connection.
But in this plan, there's no provision for open space that you just mentioned. Then they're housing blocks.
If you see sort of to the north, you'll see that angle or that extended strip of open space from the south of the wetland that extends south and juts out from the buffer. That is the additional provision of open space, and then it will accommodate the drainage system that sits within road reserve that then runs between that southern segment and then down to St Leonard's Creek.
I can't see it. I'm sorry. If you could, if you're willing to submit further information in regard to that to show how that works, I'd be...
you can email that through.
Thank you. And the other question is, provision of public open space, are you calculating the St Leonard's Creek and the Penarge wetlands in the calculation? Or, I mean, how are you calculating a 10% public open space?
That might be a question that I defer to Stephen.
Quickly answer your question, there's two values in there. So when you actually do what they call the LN or livable neighbourhoods, the creek line and the buffer, the wetland core are not incorporated in that. The separation or the wetland buffer is known as what they call restricted use open space. So that in part is in the calculation.
Any further questions? Councillor Parry first.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A quick question, if you don't mind. We see a second primary school being built in Brabham now, which is certainly essential. However, there's no mention of a high school whatsoever. Have you had any discussions with the DOE, Department of Education, in regards to a high school in Brabham, please?
I'll jump back in there again. So in what we call the third structure plan, the future Brabham structure plan to the south, there is to be another primary school as well as what they call an education precinct, and there'll be the Brabham High School in there. And we have been and are continuing to have discussions with the Department of Education.
So what's the timeline in regards to the second primary school as well? Because right now in Brabham they're certainly oversubscribed, and I think it's 640 within their first year.
Look, we can deliver them the primary school. Unfortunately, the Department of Education deliver them. Primary schools in particular, you typically don't know until closer because it becomes a bit of an announcement on their behalf. So yeah, we can only portray what we've been told, and that there's an urgency and they're keen for the primary school site. I can't give you a date, unfortunately.
So they've given us no indication when that primary school is being built?
No, not to us, no.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Henderson, you're next.
Thank you. There's a range of lot sizes from R40 to 60, I think it is, apart from the R20 along the road. What percentage of 60 are you working on, and same percentage as you get more bigger, should I say?
To be honest, we don't know that number. That will sort of get refined through the the subdivision process. But unlike to the south, where it's fair to say this is a bit more of a traditional, hence why we haven't used the R80 that you saw in the southern. The area doesn't really warrant that density. What we're really trying to do is just allow for bookending, so to speak, so we don't get side fencing, and it provides for the contemporary sort of 12.5 but reduced depths, or potentially some laneway product if we think it's required. But when I say laneway product, not like what you're seeing in the first structure plan, but more your contemporary townhouse.
Just to add, if I may, we've seen continuous shift in the southern portion. So you're saying there will not be any continuous shift in this section?
So when you say continuous shift, as in?
Lot sizes.
No, look, all I can say is this is definitely going to be a bit more of a traditional structure plan. This structure plan doesn't warrant the density. It won't drive the density, whereas to the south, we've got the train station, we've got more of the centre and the lights, so to speak. So, speaking for Pete here, but their Lights View product, which has been presented to council as part of the first structure plan, there's no intention of implementing any of that, hence why there's no R80 in this structure plan.
Councillor Congerton.
Thank you. In the correspondence we received recently, you indicated there that the immediate focus is to relocate the kangaroos from Yuildene to Walcott, scheduled for next week and meeting this week. Can you give us an update on what's happening there, please?
Yeah, so we're currently scheduled to do that this Saturday. We're still waiting for formal confirmation from the DBCA, but we've been liaising with Wildlife Care WA. They've got about 10 volunteers. We've got someone from the RSPCA coming as well. So as we sit here today, there was a meeting happening on site late this afternoon, but I believe that we're hoping that we can go on Saturday. So the intention is obviously to push those kangaroos. There's probably 40 to 60 south of Yuildene, shut that off with the kangaroo gate, and then we'll shift focus to how we deal with the problem, I guess, the ultimate solution. I will just note that the WAPC are now engaged, and they'll be at the next meeting that we have on the 22nd of April, I believe. Yep.
Last question, Councillor Colley.
I'll make it a triple then, Mayor. The provision for aged care and child care lots, are they provided there, or is that in the subdivision stage? That's one, because with the situation for trying to squeeze in childcare places into areas is quite difficult. I think it should be done at this early stage. So just that question. And also, are you aware that the Henley Brook Avenue road is, at the last council meeting, is basically put on hold for the moment until it's basically a sort of type of review going there? And how does that affect this structure plan? If there was a realignment, for example, to take Henley Brook Avenue further away from Penage wetlands, how does that affect what you're trying to do?
We are aware that Henley Brook Avenue has been put on hold. We've actually got a meeting at the City tomorrow with officers around that very issue. As to the impact for our project, we haven't looked at it in detail yet because we were only told very recently. So we'd have to come back to you in relation to that.
One further question, Meg. Would you be prepared to put this application on hold until we get some sort of resolution around Henley Brook Avenue or some direction as to where we're going?
that would not be our preference at this time, no.
Thanks, gents.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we move to item 4.7, the existing addition to existing microbrewery restaurant shop at Lot 2, number 8731 West Swan Road, Henley Brook. And Mr. Lan G'day from the Swan Valley Tourism Alliance, speaking against the staff recommendation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, staff, I'm representing the SVTA. The SVTA recommends that the council refuse this application. This property falls within Area B of the Swan Valley and is prominently situated on West Swan Road. To their credit, the proponents have constructed an aesthetically appealing building that is in keeping and sympathetic to the rural amenity. This has been a substantial investment by the proponents and an example of the type of investment that should be championed. Therefore, the Alliance does not support this application for the following reasons. The proposed sea containers are not in keeping with the existing built structures on the site. The sea containers are for ad hoc purposes, yet will have a permanent footprint on the site. The number of sea containers to be used is considerable and therefore will be a major element of the built form of the whole property. Visual amenity is not only important to neighbouring properties and for the road. The visual amenity for visitors also needs to be taken into consideration. From a tourist perspective, visual amenity for visitors to the site would be severely compromised by these sea containers, given that sea containers do not enhance the cultural heritage, natural environment and unique landscape of the Swan Valley. The SVTA are not supporters of sea containers being used as part of tourism experiences in the Swan Valley. Sea containers are not naturally part of the rural landscape and their proliferation in the Swan Valley should be restricted to temporary storage purposes only. We therefore support the Swan Valley Planning Committee's reasons for recommending refusal. This application does not meet the new Act requirement for protecting rural visual amenity, nor does it meet the overall vision of the Swan Valley being a world-class visitor destination. The SVTA is very cognizant of the economic constraint that has impacted businesses due to COVID-19 and understand why businesses are trying to maximise their earnings moving forward in the most cost-effective way. However, future tourism investment in the Swan Valley should not be the casualty and ultimately be compromised. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Elaine. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Coley.
Elaine, thanks for that. If these buildings were clad in something other than the metal that they're already in, for example, weatherboard, would that make a difference to application?
It certainly would have softened the look, but we're also worried about the footprint. The large footprint. Considering the area of the site area. So, provided that it fitted within the building envelope and it was presented in a different way, other than just a sea container. I think that would put a different slant on the application.
Further questions? Thank you, Elaine.
Thank you.
Okay, councillors, you've received a written deputation of 4.9. So we now move to 4.10, extension of the aged care facility and 2 consulting rooms at Lot 71, Number 6, Evelyn Road, and Lot 3, Number 27, Great Northern Highway, Middle Swan. Are all our speakers here, Amanda? Okay, so we've got Kim Dopal and...
So this is Mr Lane here for item 4.9.
Okay, so all right, I wasn't aware he was speaking, it's just got here written. Do you wish to speak, or do you just want to take if there's any questions?
I just wanted to make known that if any of the councillors have any questions of me today, I've come all the way from Adelaide Town to answer them for you.
Well, in that case, we'll see if we can find one for you. Can some councillor make Mr Lane's trip worthwhile?
What page are we on for 4.9?
262. It's the replacement of an existing telecommunications infrastructure in Ballajura.
Neater, more functional, and it's going to be described behind advertising.
Yeah.
It's the technology.
That's okay.
Okay,
That's all right.
Thanks, Mr. Lane. Thanks for coming across.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we go back to the aged care facility. If our speakers are there. Okay, our first speakers are Kim Dopal and Janine Marsh from Dopal Marsh, the applicant, speaking in support of the staff recommendation. Councillors, you have received written deputations. And who's speaking? Kim or Janine?
Right.
I guess it's you, Kim. You've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, presiding member, elected members and staff. I'm Kim Dopal from 61 Forest Street, Subiaco. From Dopal Marsh Architects, we are the applicants, and I wish to speak on item 4.10 in support of the officer's recommendation for approval. Building 2 is proposed next to the already approved aged care building, which is currently under construction. You may have seen it if you've been by. The development approval proposal is in line with the already approved master plan for Lot 3, which is now proposed Lot 100 because the total land is being subdivided into 2 larger lots. Two comments were received during the advertising period, and I wish to speak to those. The main concern being the access into the site from Richardson Road to the north. The access has always been, the access way has been already approved under the current development approval for Building 1, the aged care building, and is not part of this proposal. So the access way is already there, it's been constructed. However, the officer's report explains in detail the traffic movements and has confirmed that only a 15.3% increase in traffic will result by the inclusion of Building 2. The officer's report supports the Shawmac traffic report in that the existing road system to the north of the site is more than adequate to cater for this new proposal. The traffic report has been accepted in the officer's report, and the proposal is a safe and manageable outcome. Your support for the approval in line with the officer's recommendation is sought. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Also joining us is Marie-Louise McDonald, who's the CEO of Masonic Care. She's not speaking, but she's here to answer any questions as well. Oh, you're speaking too?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have 2 cracks. All right.
Good evening.
Thanks,
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Good evening, presiding member, elected members and staff. I am Janine Marsh of Dopal Marsh Architects, the architects for both Building 1, the aged care, and Building 2, which is the form of this DA. Thank you for the opportunity to address item 4.10. This DA proposal is part of the expansion of Masonic Care WA aged care requirements. Part of this has come about by being COVID-driven, with additional space requirements required in Building 1, which has caused the relocation of some of the space into the new building on Level 1, which provides extra facilities that have been identified in providing increased care to the proposed residents. Also, on the ground level, we have car parking at the rear, which was the request of the planning officers, and also an opportunity of extended facilities for public use on this ground level. One of the important KPIs for Masonic Care was that all design of the proposed retirement village aged care campus was to have community engagement and to form an important part of the locality in which the Masonic Care WA is investing. This design has been carefully considered to maximise the northern orientation, to step down in scale from Building 1 to Building 2 to provide that streetscape, To reflect the materiality of Building 1, both in the metal look-alike timber columns, the brickwork detail with fenestration, metal cladding and large glazed shop fronts, which provide surveillance. It reinforces the landmark corner of the extension of Building 1, being Building 2, but it has its own identity and activation at the street, which is an important part of a street amenity. The rear of the design of the building has also been carefully considered as it forms the frontage of that site for people that are entering by vehicles, and that has the screening that has been carried around from the northern side to the west. It has a metal vertical column which provides a striking feature for signage, and the building also provides screening to the service yard from Building 1. Considerations in the design in relation to its location has been a green buffer of 3 metres, which is heavily landscaped to the neighbour on the north. There is acoustic treatment for the plant room, and the first level has a decorative screen on the northern side which will prevent overlooking. The link to Building 1 has been carefully considered by a staff access bridge, and the site of the whole building has been developed with a flat roof to reduce the overall height of the building. We have worked collegiately with the design review panel and adopted many of their recommendations to provide a design that has now been approved by the assessing officers or made a recommendation for approval, and we appreciate the support of the full council and look forward to a positive support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Janine. Councillors, any question of either Janine, Kim or Marie-Louise? Councillor Catalano.
Yes, thank you. I've got a question about stormwater runoff, and I was just wondering, do you know where it's going to be ending up? I noticed there was actually, perhaps not in these, I did actually see some diagrams at one point or plans at one time that there was going to be a sort of like a little waterway through the middle of the development, and I was just curious, is that going to be, so there's a number of questions. First of all, where's the stormwater going to end up?
To you, presiding member, because of the nature of the soil being mostly clay, the site is going to be connected to a drainage system, but what has been mentioned in the officer's report within the landscaping on the northern side is to have, they're commonly known as compensating basins, which is a sort of a hollowed out section, so that if that there's a lot of rain, the water has an opportunity of seeping away at a regulated flow. So eventually it all ends up in the city's drainage system. But there have been included in the designs filters and traps to prevent solid material like leaves or small branches and things like that getting into the system.
It's just that I understand that the kind of creek, there's a sort of natural creek line, but it's not actually on your property.
No, it's
so
not.
Is that stormwater going to be draining into that creek line?
No,
that's
it won't be.
Sort of in that land.
No,
so you mean the stormwater is going to stay on your property then?
To my knowledge, yes.
It'll stay on your property. It won't go into the City of Swan drainage system.
And it won't go into the Swan River.
It won't go into the Swan River. So, I mean, that's going to be quite a lot of hard surface with parking lots and, roofs and...
Well, at the moment, the site's 4.5 hectares.
Yes.
And it's the same amount of water that falls on that site. And there are areas there of high clay. So before this proposal, there would have been a lot of water on the site anyway.
Okay. Well, yes.
It's part of the approval.
But it's hard surface, isn't there? There's a hard surface where you put down tarmac is not the same as clay because it does actually soak it up.
No, but the water is collected and directed by drainage into systems which hold the water and allow it to disperse over time. It's the same as further up the hill. In Mundaring, for instance, you have to hold the volume of water on the site and you're only permitted to discharge a certain number of litres per second into the system.
All right. So the design for that particular drainage system, is that something that I ask you about, or is it something that I ask the staff about? For designs, some designs about that, and actually, so I can find out where that water's going to end up. Will that be you or the staff?
Well, probably at this stage, because it's a development approval, so we're talking about the overall idea of the use and the building. It's more appropriate that which will be fully detailed at a building permit stage, because that work will be done in detail by the hydraulic consultant. So it's probably a little bit premature. You can certainly ask your staff where they think it's going to go.
All right, but you don't actually know at the moment. You haven't got that design.
That detailed work has not been done yet.
All right then. And what kind of... I noticed there was a submission in here from a local resident who was concerned about the acoustic sort of treatment, or the fact that the acoustic wasn't given a residential acoustic assessment. So I was just wondering, what kind of noise do you think that this proposal is going to actually produce in terms of residents that live close to the area?
Okay, well, I suppose there's two sources of noise. One is traffic, and the second one is plant. Now, because the site is adjacent to the existing residential at R20, we discussed and agreed with the city that we would design the building under the requirements of the residential design codes, State Planning Policy Volume 2 7.3. So we have adopted the requirements of a multiple residential building instead of a commercial building. A commercial building has less stringent requirements than residential, so we've increased the setback to 3 metres. In order to get any building permit these days, one needs to achieve or have prepared an acoustic report, and the materials selected have to achieve the sound attenuation, just like in this room here. If you've ever wondered what all those little holes are doing in the plywood, that's a sound attenuation. And the idea with that is the sound waves go in the little holes and they don't come back. And I must compliment whoever did that, because the acoustics in here are very good, unlike a lot of restaurants that you go to, because the sound bounces around.
Okay. But I was just wondering, I mean, I think the resident must have been talking or thinking about sound emanating from the site onto the residential area.
Right.
And I wondered what you thought they might be referring to, or would there be sound that, other than traffic, that they might be referring to?
Well, all buildings that have air conditioning, for instance, do generate some sound. It's very small these days with the new technology. Now, the plant room is shown underneath the building, on the northern side of the building, and that will be sound attenuated in accordance with the acoustic report that will form part of a building permit. So it won't comply if the sound from that plant leaves the site. So it wouldn't be, at this stage, possible for that to happen. I think Janine might wish to add to that.
I was just going to make a comment also that under the new NCC 2019, which is a new building code that is starting as of the 1st of May, there are more stringent requirements that come out now in terms of glazing. And so at the moment it would see that this building is probably going to be double glazed, so that would provide an extra amount of acoustic. But we have a qualified acoustic consultant who is working with us on this project, and we're looking at all those areas that would be
okay. That's to keep sound in, is that what you're saying?
Well, that would be... and sound out, yeah.
I know, but I think the resident that made the submission was actually thinking about sound coming out into the residential area.
Yeah, so that would protect inside the building. The plant room is all acoustically louvered controlled. So we have certain, as Kim said, we have certain controls that we have to tick. So our acoustic consultant has done a very comprehensive report, because since this submission we've been working on the next stage of the development. So we've had a lot more people involved. And maybe, because Kim was, it's a while since we submitted this, as part of our DA submission, we actually did have a stormwater management and drainage information in our report, which actually, if you were to...
I'd like to see that.
And that was part of, I think it should have been part of the package, I believe.
Is it in here?
And there was an appendix at the back as well, which was
Are you
submitted.
talking about the original application?
Yes.
That was back about 3 years ago?
No, I'm talking about this one now.
Oh, this one here.
Yeah.
Oh,
And there was an appendix put in by the civil engineers. So if for some reason it's hard to find, I'm sure the staff would be able to direct you to it.
Oh.
So it does talk in detail. The council provides some quite stringent criteria that we have to meet in terms of that.
Mhm.
And so that would be addressed both on Building 1 and Building 2 because they kind of interconnect now. Yeah. So.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coley.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be quick. I just want to thank you for including the provision of future solar panels on the roof, and obviously it's structurally engineered to take that. But the roofing material, I'm conscious of the Dune Matte Thermatech Solar. Is that something that would reflect heat rather than absorb it? I'm conscious of the fact we should be trying to reflect heat rather than create a massive absorbing mass.
It is a reflecting surface, but it will comply with the aircraft provisions, so there won't be shining glare as it is on the flight path.
That's the best. That's the best reflecting. Or
well, it's not a shining surface like, say, Zincalume, which is the zinc-looking colour,
Yeah.
and it's not a white. It's a colour that is not reflective, but it is a light material, so it will not absorb the heat. That's what the solar panels do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Janine, and thank you, Marie-Louise. Good luck with that one. Okay, we now move to item 4.13, which is an amendment number 919 to local planning scheme number 17 to insert telecommunications infrastructure as an additional use on lot 1003, Vidello Drive, The Vines. And Miss Martina Webber speaking against the recommendation, and she has also submitted a written deputation. Thank you, Martina. You've got 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Excuse myself, I'm a little bit nervous. Yes, I'm quite concerned because I believe that the local planning scheme is there for a reason, and actually to protect, for example, the visual character of the vines. And I believe you know the golf course is quite important. Actually, I did a little picture. You don't know if you can see it, but just a little structure how it could look like. So if they actually allow a tower to be built exactly on this position, so you will have the mini golf, and behind straight there you will have the structure of the tower. Apparently it's 40 meters tall, so quite big and visible. You can't really hide it. I'm concerned for a few reasons. One of them is quite private and personally. So my husband, he works there, and I'm very concerned of his safety. His workshop will be less than 20 meters close to the proposed structure. Also, other workshops will even be closer: mechanics, greenkeepers, maintenance. Very close also is a mini golf, what's been used by families and small children. And I've done a little bit of research. Obviously, I'm not a scientist. I'm a mother. I'm a wife, and I'm trying to protect my family and also the workers at the Vines, the families that come and visit, and to protect the holiday feel, the resort feel there. So, yeah. I think the resort should be a designated low EMR area to protect those who are unwell or do not consent to exposure, being a place to relax and holiday for families with young children. I don't know if you know, but children absorb more radiation due to their thinner skulls and small bodies. Obviously also you have golfers, workers of the resort in all departments and all other visitors. The occupational health and safety guidelines should be adhered to, and codes and restriction of exposure protection. The question is, can the carrier assure safety under 0.1 volts per meter under the workers' occupational health and safety restrictions? Who is liable if injuries occur in the years to come? Those are questions that I can't answer. I would like to know who can answer those. Anyway, to look at the Communication Industry Act and codes, I had a look, obviously, to familiarize myself with them, and it actually states that to minimize the electromagnetic energy to the public, the code states to avoid community-sensitive location. In my eyes, this is a sensitive location where lots of people will come together. And also to mention the natural environment with wildlife protecting, like local beehives that are around, and endangered red-tailed black cockatoos. So we do know from scientific evidence that radiation has an effect on wildlife, especially bees and small insects and small birds. And we're already having a decline in those already, and the black cockatoos are endangered, as we know. The vine should be seen as a community-sensitive location and be protected. It is impossible to restrict general public access to our hazard areas in a community-sensitive location, so you can't really hide from it if it's there. I would like to see, to protect this area, have telecommunication tower moved at least 500 meters away to protect everyone, and yeah.
Thank you, Ms Webber. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Scully.
Through you, Mayor, you said you had some questions that you're not sure how to get an answer for.
Well, there's like who's liable if injuries occur in the years to come, Obviously, we were kind of told that if they're, let's say my husband's working there for 10 years, another 10 years to come, and apparently the cases of certain diseases like leukemia, blood cancer, brain tumors, things are in a upcline. They're way increased, and obviously we have got exposure more and more now. Everyone has got a phone. There's towers everywhere, Wi-Fi everywhere. So we actually can't really reduce, and we need to reduce where we can. And if we go to a resort where we want to relax and don't be exposed as much, I think it should be protected. And yeah.
Okay, you got a further question?
No, thank you.
Any further questions? There's a hand up over here, Councillor Richardson.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Have you got the piece of paper that you did the anticipated sketch? Can I have a look at that?
Yeah. Actually, I've got a few more if you're interested.
Thank you.
Councillor Henderson, I think I see your hand up.
Yes, Mayor. I thank you for the presentation. I think I responded with an email showing some pictures of antennas that are utilised in the UK that are like hidden antennas. Is that an email I sent to you? Because there were a number of questions from people about that.
I don't remember that, no.
No, it must have been someone else. So a lot of concern about the physical appearance. Are you concerned about the physical appearance of these things, or are you more concerned about the radiation?
I'm more concerned about the radiation. I mean, I can quote the World Health Organization that actually stated that, I can't find my notes. One moment. So the enormous negative health impacts, the World Health Organization, International Agency for Research on Cancer, concluded in 2011 that RF radiation of frequency from up to 300 gigahertz, extremely high frequencies, are possible carcinogenic to humans. Group 2B, however, recent evidence including the latest studies on cell phone use and brain cancer risk indicate that RF radiation is proven carcinogenic to humans and should now be classified as a group 1 carcinogen, along with tobacco smoke and asbestos. Also, I don't know if you're aware, but there's actually evidence of biological harm that the Australian Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety Agency, ARPANSA, doesn't look at, and that agency is ORSA, Ocean Radio Frequency Scientific Advisory Association, an independent database currently containing over 3,000 scientific studies sourced from all over the world. Evidence exposure to wireless technology have significant effect on humans, animals and plants.
Thank you, Ms Weber. I think the answer there, Councillor Anderson, was radiation. Any further questions, councillors? Thank you, Ms Weber.
Thank you for coming in.
We now move to item 4.14, a change of use from a restaurant and food and beverage production to a reception function venue at lot 2602, 633 Great Northern Highway, Herne Hill, and Mr John Rex from the Swan Valley Tourism Alliance speaking against the staff recommendation. You know the rules, John.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, councillors. Again, the Swan Valley Tourist Alliance does not support the change of use approval for this development application. The history of the site should be evaluated when considering whether to refuse or approve. The Swan Valley Planning Committee at their meeting on the 3rd of August in 2015 resolved to refuse that application on the following basis. The proposal did not meet the objectives of the Swan Valley Planning Act of 1995. It is inconsistent with the rural character and is not subordinate or incidental to the predominant use of Area B, and is of a scale and form that overwhelms the intrinsic nature of the land. The original application sought approval for one building will be used as a coffee shop, dining, or it is classified as a restaurant. Another building was to be used as a coffee shop, roasting and tasting, which was classified as a food and beverage production. Excuse my voice. A maximum of 50 visitors was to be at the site at any one time. The operating hours were from 8 o'clock until 5, 7 days a week, but they were going to be closed on a Monday during winter. Coffee beans, lavender scones, lavender tea, lavender ice cream were to be produced on the site. The proponents' entire development application back then was predicted on the basis that they would redevelop the site and incorporate food, beverage production, a restaurant, and in the restaurant they would serve roasting coffee. They would serve, they have sales, a cafe and a bakery, where the goods, which were coffee and lavender scones, lavender tea, lavender ice cream, would be produced and sold on site. The original plans as submitted clearly depicted the planting of lavender in two areas to facilitate the planned food production. This did not happen, and the unsightly remnants of the pine trees have been left in situ since then. The entire development site has been left in an untidy and not in keeping with the Swan Valley rural character and the amenity of the Swan Valley. Further, we support the Swan Valley Planning Committee's most recent decision, that was on the 7th of December 2020, to refuse this development application. The concept of tourism in the valley has changed dramatically in recent years. The idea that a development under any banner of tourism is no longer considered acceptable. LPS 17 and Amendment 176 underscores this change, with the view that the development of the Swan Valley should be incidental, and the agricultural pursuit. The Swan Valley Planning Act of 2020 and the Swan Valley Planning scheme further highlights this. Due regard should be given to the draft scheme, and in that reception centres, exhibition centres are an eye use in that table. If the Swan Valley is going to remain a prosperous and premier visitor destination today and into the future, there needs to be a commitment from the city and the state to ensure that viticulture, agriculture and rural activities are precedent rather than the standalone tourist venues. This is simply a development application by the proponents who have failed to comply with their original approvals. Several businesses have failed on the site since it's been built, and it would appear that the proponents are looking to obtain an approval wherever they can. The proponents have shown a complete lack of commitment to the original concept. It is our opinion that proponents should be expected to fulfil their original development obligations and prove their commitment to the future of the Swan Valley.
Thank you, Mr Rex.
Hey?
Thank you.
Done.
Any questions of Mr Rex, councillors? Nope.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. We now move to item 4.16, which is single house and driveway, lot 269, number 10, Dulcify Court, Brigadoon. And Mr Terry Capehorn speaking against the staff recommendation. Thank you, Mr Capehorn. You've got 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'd just like to address the points that the staff concluded during the site visit that the city staff concluded. Where the residential dwellings are, there is a basic expectation of lights during night time. But this is true, but in the semi-rural setting of Brigadoon, the building envelopes have been developed to limit the visual disturbances of lights flowing from one house to the other. The proposed dwelling, a two-storey dwelling with a large deck on the second storey, when used in the evening, will shine directly into our house. Also, where there's a driveway, they go in or out their dwelling, their car lights will directly impact our bedroom windows. The building envelope was designed for the driveway to be on Dulcify Court, not on Connemara Drive. Point 2. The site visit revealed that at ground level, only views to the submitter's roof were achieved. Is utterly inaccurate. I've provided photographs to every councillor, so they'll be able to see if they I think it's the last photo. You'll be able to see my house. I'm actually standing at the front door of where this new building would be constructed, and you can clearly see way more than the roof. This building, when it is constructed, will be about 8 metres in height, but it has a very large deck built on one side, and when that deck is complete, eye height will be at least 4.8, maybe 5 metres. So you'll be able to look anywhere you like on our block. We will have nowhere where they can't see. With zero privacy. It also says 80-metre dwelling separation, not if it's placed where they propose to put it. If it was in the building envelope, that maybe would. The house will be high enough that it would overlook all of our house and be able to see every aspect of our block. We already have a privacy taken away by the residence being built on our left, which when we bought the block was Zone C, never to be built upon, but that's a different story. The vegetation loss. If you have a look at the photographs that I've provided, you'll show that there's a previous. Number 1 is before and number 2 is after. Whoever owns Dulcify has already cleared massively inside their building envelope, but also all the trees where they want to build their house, which is outside of their building envelope. And they've been cleared, obviously, without a permit, because I can't see that happening. When I brought that up to, I went and spoke to someone actually in the last a couple of days ago. Oh, that's nothing to do with me, which I believe it is. The trees that have been removed outside the building envelope, if they'd been left in place, they'd provide a perfect screen if they were held to build in the building envelope. I can't see why they should be rewarded for clearing more of their building envelope and outside of the envelope by giving permission to move it forward and impact onto our lifestyle. According to the city, the proposed setback would not be detrimental to the rural landscape. Well, I disagree with that. The whole purpose of living in a rural setting and why residents buy there is for the house to nestle into the rural landscape and not be an eyesore right in your face for other residents. For the main driveway to be on Connemara Drive, the proposed building facing Connemara Drive rather than Dulcify Court, in reality the setback, it is 30 metres. They want to bring it to within 12 metres would be the closest point of the house. The legislation that building envelopes are no longer modified is there for a reason. The building envelope that the owners of Dulcify Court have been given is more than generous. It's very large. A considerable amount of the building envelope has already been cleared. They already have a dwelling on the building envelope at the rear of their block. Are the city staff proposing to increase the building envelope substantially? This will set a precedent for others. The northwest section of the block would provide a very similar view to Connemara Drive. They say they would like to see the twinkling lights. There are no street lights in Connemara Drive. I don't know where the twinkling lights have come from.
Thank you, Mr Capon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr Capon, councillors? Councillor Catalano, you're first.
Yes, thank you. Which is your house? Sorry, I just missed the
We're
first
number
bit.
19 Connemara Drive.
So
We're directly
you
opposite.
Next door, or you're this one here?
That's us, right there.
Okay, all right. I see, yes, okay. You're affected by that. Thank you for that.
Very much.
Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mr Capon. So, looking at Google Maps, I can see it's very heavily vegetated, and looking at the current city of Swan, it's showing a large amount of it removed. Do you have any idea how long ago it was all that vegetation was removed?
I believe the Google Maps image is 2018.
Right.
I was working away at the time, so it was already in. They were already doing it before I actually noticed it, and I thought, well, you know, they're clearing their building envelope a bit. You know, perhaps they've got permission to do it, so why should I? But when I came back after another rotation, there was a huge swath of trees removed outside of the building envelope, and now it was obvious they did that deliberately. That's where they wanted to put their house to start with, and I don't think they should be allowed to.
Thank you.
Councillor Congerton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Terry, would you be open to a site visit by councillors to have a look at it?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councillor Cole, did you have your hand up? No. Okay. Any further questions, councillors? Thank you, Mr Caborn.
Thank you very much for your time.
Now move to item 5.5, which is a petition for a slip lane to the shopping centre in Kiara, and Mr Jelani Khan speaking against the staff recommendation. And you're declaring an interest. Thank you, Councillor McNamara. Thank you, Mr Khan. You've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Honourable Mayor, councillors, thank you for the opportunity to present here this evening and to be able to discuss the proposed works on 153 Morley Drive East in Kiara, which was previously tabled through a petition containing 419 signatures. Kiara Pharmacy has been servicing the local community since the early 70s. Initially, she's situated on a humble shack on Morley Drive and Ivanhoe Street, and then moved to Eden Hill Shopping Centre. This was before the development of the suburb of Kiara. It then moved to the Eden Hill Shopping Centre and then to the Kiara Shopping Centre in the late 80s. Kiara Pharmacy services a truly diverse community, including the disability services, since the days of Purton and Bennett Brook, and now the Department of Communities. We also service organisations like Nelson Haven, Rocky Bay, Active, and quite a few others as well. These group homes all reside in the surrounding area to the pharmacy. We also service Dabal Yurigan Health Services, predominantly through their Midland and Mirrabooka clinics. As such, we have quite a significant traffic flow in and out of the pharmacy, travelling both east and west onto Morley Drive. There's also a noteworthy amount of disability buses that enter and exit the premises. I refer to the technical issues raised by the city staff, recommending the Shire not to undertake the proposed modifications. With respect to the driver confusion that they mentioned, there is already an existing slip lane on the left-hand side of Morley Drive, travelling east, to allow entry into the Bottlebrush Drive. This slip lane also provides entry into a Puma petrol station. There has not caused any driver confusion. We simply ask that there be made an extension to the slip lane to encompass the pharmacy driveway also. Cars are already slowing down to enter the slip lane, but also to enter the petrol station or to travel further on to the Bottlebrush Drive. There is ample room, approximately 16-metre verge, to the left-hand turn to accommodate for the proposed slip lane. Also, on the opposite side of the road, there is traffic travelling west towards Tonkin Highway. There is a slip lane and medium brake to turn into Bottlebrush Drive. This medium strip was extended initially to accommodate the Kiara Police Station, and then later on also to allow access for the new fire station that was put there a few years ago. Currently, the easiest access to the pharmacy premises is by driving through the Puma petrol station, which is frequently obstructed by petrol tankers. Councillor Lucas, I think, noticed the same problem yesterday when he came to notify me of that meeting. The pedestrian crossing that they also mentioned is on the right-hand side of Northmoor Road, facing Morley Drive. It'd be quite simple for pedestrians to actually cross over Morley Drive from the left-hand side of that Northmoor Road. Pedestrians are currently using both left and right-hand side to cross over Morley Drive anyway. I understand that there's trees in the median strip, and they would have to be removed for introduction of that median break and possible slip lane. Living less than 5 minutes away, I actually an avid beekeeper, and I'm pretty sure my bees go to those trees anyway to try and collect honey at times. I'm actually quite glad that our street...
Thank you, Mr. Khan. I have already allowed Mr. Khan some considerable time to carry over.
Oh, thank you.
And I've already gave Mr. Khan considerable time. You have got his deputation in front of you, so you can read it. So any questions of Mr. Khan, councillors? You've got his written deputation in front of you. Councillor Catalano.
I gather you've seen the officer's recommendation.
I have seen.
And they don't, support particularly the. It seems to me the island, that sort of right-hand turn off into. So I was wondering, would you? At this stage, be happy if there was an extension of the slip road going in left off Morley Drive, as people travel east,
yes,
and then perhaps leave this other one to another time?
I would be happy for any improvement as such.
Yeah.
Access to the pharmacy is very important for our elderly patients and for our disabled patients.
And I'm very aware that that's a very dodgy corner and very dodgy intersection anyway. So, but there was just a lot of safety issues raised about that particular, if that was going to be across a right-hand...
To going in?
Going in, that it would interfere with this intersection a bit further down.
They mentioned it needing to be 75 metres. Currently, I think they measured it at 65 metres.
Yeah. Okay.
The traffic slowing a little bit would make it so much easier to be able to do so. That slowing traffic also would allow, obviously, the police and the fire trucks to be able to cross over easily too. And the fact that there's a school adjacent to the fire station.
Yes, yeah.
I also noted that there are cases, even on the corner of Walter Road and Beachborough Road, there's a very tiny slip lane just entering into the new BP station, which is considerably smaller than 65 metres also.
Okay, all right, okay.
We would love to be able to have both put in there, but obviously any change would be beneficial for our patients.
Okay, great. Thanks for that.
Okay. Councillor Congleton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In the report, it commented on the cost associated with the development of the slip lane.
Yes.
And this all being a private development, not a city-owned development. Is there any appetite for a co-contribution?
With regards to the pharmacy such, we are a small business, obviously trying to manage as best as we can. That cost would be quite a considerable burden for the pharmacy to be able to manage as such. For that reason, I mean, as the Shire, they're looking out for the best interests not only of the small businesses but also of the general community. And for that reason, I would implore that they please consider if the council is able to manage that. We would not have the ability to fund that, unfortunately.
Sorry, further on, it was actually a co-contribution, not a total contribution.
It would depend on what that contribution would have to be, but the way things are at the moment as well, it would be quite difficult.
Councillor Coley.
Through you, Mayor, I'm just wondering the map or the layout that we've been presented, is that done by yourself or a planner or someone with expertise in road?
I had an architect just do it up for me.
So it hasn't been assessed by a road traffic expert?
As such, no.
So there's no road... Have you had any road traffic expert
we have
consultant
not, no.
look at it? No, okay.
No.
I might have a question to staff then, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Councillor Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you, I'd just like to ask, with the pedestrians accessing the pharmacy and also the other businesses there, how many are coming from the other side, from the south side of Morley Drive?
Walking or
walking, so using the pedestrian crossing across the median strip.
Basically, a lot of them would be going through to either the doctors and then driving there and then coming through. Quite often, it would be people having their prescriptions with them coming through. I won't be able to give you an exact answer. I'm sorry. I mean, we do service quite a significant area in that community because we've been there for such a long time. I'm not able to give you an answer how many people would be using it, but we do have quite a majority of the residents along Morley Drive coming into the pharmacy, and a lot of them would have signed our petition also. That pedestrian crossing is the side closer to where the proposed median strip would be. However, there is a road, Northmore Road, just on the corner there, and just moving that pedestrian crossing to the other side of the road, which people do use anyway, would allow them to basically come across into that shopping strip.
Just a follow-on, Mr Mayor, if I could. I did have a look at that because you mentioned that in deputation, but if they're crossing a Northmere Road on the other side, they'd have to cross over where the turning vehicles are turning right onto Northmore. So pedestrians, I'd have to ask an expert, but I don't believe it'd be safe to put a pedestrian crossing where the turning lane is. I mean, I'm not unfortunately not an expert in that area. Yeah, of course.
But I do see them using that medium strip already, and that's what I can comment on. Or even if that medium strip is there turning into Northmore, there is a pathway that travels along that Morley Drive, and maybe just going that little bit further again would allow them to cross over safely as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gunn. Any further questions? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gunn.
Thank you.
Yep, round up. Councillor McNamara. Okay, we now move to C1.5, which is a motion for Councillor Coley regards Bitchatech at Lot 16, number 1392 and Lot 32, 1398, Great Northern Highway, Upper Swan. The first speaker on this item is Mr Robert Lundy from Bitchatech against the notice of motion. Thank you, Mr Lundy. 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening all, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on the motion. Following a failed Aspen plan development just north of Upper Swan 10 years ago, we were assisted by council officers to locate and develop a site at Upper Swan, which we currently occupy. We applied for originally a discretionary use. Subsequently, that morphed into a need to rezone the site. You probably all know the story. We ultimately lost that fight despite initial blessings by council to proceed and despite council officers' recommendation to approve. So whilst this outcome was disappointing to us, we heard the umpire's call and have moved on. We searched for a suitable alternative site and found one available in the Mouchet industrial subdivision that's being developed now. We contracted in September to purchase lot 14 on that subdivision, similar in size to the Upper Swan site. Finance and purchase and development of this site is all in place. Design has been undertaken and the Shire of Chitting has approved our development of that site. Fabricators and contractors to build the site have been engaged, and we've been granted early access by the developer to start works, which we are currently underway on. All blending facility assets and much of the mobile and static tank facilities at Upper Swan will be relocated to Mouchet. And all this is programmed to be done within the next 3 or 4 months. A new blending plant has also been ordered from Europe and is on the water now and will be located at Mouchet. Odour and noise complaints directed at Bitchatec by individuals over recent years have been investigated by DWER and council officers a number of occasions, often with no notice of inspection. Fault has not once been attributed to Bitchatec. In fact, on a number of occasions, they have been proven not to be Bitchatec. We're doing the right thing. We've clean bill of health from council and from government authorities. DWER have even advised that they've closed the file on the matter. We have fulfilled all the requirements for council. Council officers and DWR are aware of what we are doing with respect to Mouchet. Passing this motion will unnecessarily tie up time and cost for council officers and for Bitchatec staff, all for something that is happening anyway. We'll all be in place shortly, so respectfully we contend that this motion is superfluous.
Thank you, Ms Lundy. If you'd like to take a seat. The next speaker on this item is Ms Janet Benaim from the Upper Swan District Resident Ratepayers Association. In support of the motion, thank you, Ms Benaim. You too have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Jan Benaim and I represent the Upper Swan Ratepayers and Residents Association, and we are in support of Mr Kiley's motion. We are here tonight as a result of the Council's approval in 2016 for the construction of the infrastructure for a bitumen processing plant, being a workshop and tank farm, which were designed to house emulsion and polymer blending units to store bitumen binder, bitumen products and related chemicals. These works appeared to preempt approval of a scheme amendment to allow bitumen processing. In 2020, as you know, the Minister for Planning refused proposed Amendment 150, additional use general industry bitumen processing, with the Minister's strong refusal to allow general industry at that site. Its use under the scheme remains a transport depot, primarily for the parking of commercial vehicles. Our main concerns relate to that approval for additions to transport depot, and that in 2016, and they are: not all of the 18 development approval conditions have been cleared after 5 years. The manoeuvring and parking areas have not been sealed, and as a result, dust blows over neighbouring residences when tankers enter or exit. We are still experiencing odour incidences from the site. The most recent odour odour complaints, were made to the City for emissions on the 8th, 9th, 14th and 23rd of March 2021. The venting of emissions occurs during the transfer of heated bitumen between the tankers, the mobile tankers and static tanks. The residents of Upper Swan should not have to tolerate offensive acrid odours. The development approval did not have a condition for the management of odour issues related to chemical storage. And our third concern is, although the City has repeatedly advised that the storage of bitumen is permissible at the transport depot, the City has also advised the Council in the recent past, and the Director of the Department of Local Government, that the use of the tanks for heated bitumen storage complies with general industry land use category under the City's local planning scheme. The scheme states that general industry is not permitted in the resource zone, so we submit that surely the City should enforce the observance of the scheme.
Thank you, Ms Benaim.
We would like councillors to support Councillor Kiley's motion.
Thank you, Ms. Benaim. That is your
Excuse
time.
me, Mr Mayor. Previous speakers have had more than 3 minutes. What we've been
The other
waiting.
speaker on this item didn't. But how long have you got to go? Because you.
I'm on the last conclusion. Thanks. We'd like the councillors to support Councillor Kiley's motion. Over the past 5 years, operations on this site have severely impacted the ability of some of the Upper Swan residents to enjoy their properties. These motions will provide us with some assurance that the sites will be used purely as a transport depot and that the conditions of the approval will be cleared. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia. Any questions of either of the presenters, councillors? Right. Any questions of either presenters? Councillor Lucas.
A question for Mr. Lundy, please.
Mr. Lundy. Thank you, Ms. Benaim.
From your deputation, Mr. Lundy, do I take it that your entire operation on this site is moving to Mouchet within the next 3 to 4 or 5 months?
Not the entire operation, the transport side, which I'm agreeing with Mr. Benhaim on that will remain on site, or a large part of it will. Some of it will relocate to Mouchet, but everything else goes.
Thank you.
Any questions of either presenters, councillors?
Could I comment on that statement?
No, well, you've already had your deputation. We're now into questions. Councillor Kiley, you've got a question?
To Mr. Lundy on that.
Mr. Lundy?
Again, Mr. Lundy, the towers, the storing bitumen, that store bitumen, are they all being moved to Mouchet?
We are debating 2 of them, whether they go or not, but all the rest will definitely go, and there's every likelihood that all of them will go.
So you're not quite sure yet. On what basis will you make that decision?
It will be a matter of discussion with council officers whether we can replace 2 of those tanks with smaller tanks or not.
And just to follow up, those tanks, what is the purpose of those tanks?
You call it a warehousing facility. We bring product in from refinery operations, we store it with a road train, deliver to those tanks, and then smaller tankers, bitumen sprayers and others, pick up product out of those tanks and take them to site.
And just excuse my ignorance of the process involved in bitumen, but to get it out in and out of tanks, do you have to apply heat or mix it with an emulsifier or the like?
To hold temperature, bitumen is an insulator, so it loses temperature slowly, but it does lose temperature. So if the product is in the tanks for some period of time, we need to maintain temperature. Those tanks are approved as is with heaters. So it's logical, it's contradictory not to be able to heat in those.
And would that, we heard that on the 8th, 9th, 14th and 23rd of March there were complaints about odours of bitumen. Would that be related to those storage tanks?
No. They vent 10 metres in the air. In our view, no, and we've heard nothing about those complaints. Every time we've had a complaint, it's never been demonstrated to be us.
And one last question. Have you got approval for the heating and storage of bitumen?
Yes, we have approval for the storage of bitumen in those tanks, and they have heaters as a part of the tanks approved.
Thank you.
Councillor Catlano.
Could I ask Ms. Benaim if she'd like to comment on what she's just heard?
I was the one that made the complaints recently, and it can be verified that other members. I was at a meeting at the time when, in Railway Parade, that the odour came into the house where we were. That was so there would have been about 5 people that can corroborate that incident. Another incident. A person in Station Street can corroborate another instance. I have only complained when there has been a bitumen odour.
And you can tell that it's bitumen, and
Yes.
there's no other bitumen facility in the area that could have, because we've just heard from the Mr. Lundy that apparently there was an investigation and it wasn't found to be them. So is there any other?
We believe, and from the reading from DEWA and other, from DEWA, that odours, the venting in the store transfer process, the transfer process, I think, takes about 40 minutes. Is that right?
Depends on the size. It can take that long.
And a double tanker?
If you're transferring into a static tank.
Okay, Ms. Bonhomme, you're actually answering Councillor Catalano's question.
Oh,
so
no,
if you wouldn't
sorry.
mind to answer the question,
The venting, the odours, because they're like an incidence, they're like they're not continuous, and that would be support that there are odours coming from their transfer process. The actual tankers, the mobile tankers vent below, I think, and the large tanks that they're transferring into vent at the top. So that's as far as I understand it. So those odour incidences can occur at that time. The odour plumes, I'll call them.
Thank you, Ms. Bonhomme. I think I've given you a pretty fair crack at that. There are other councillors who wish to ask questions. Okay, well, it's a question, not a comment. Thank you, Councillor.
My question was, do you think that do you think that the bitumen operations will move from that site?
Councillor, you've already had confirmation from the owner that they're moving, so...
Yeah. Well, we're concerned about the emulsion tanks. If they're left, we're concerned about that. The transport depot does not allow for... The definition of a transport depot only is mainly for the parking of commercial vehicles.
Thank you, Mr. Bonhomme. Councillor Johnson, you got a question?
Oh, yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, my question is to Ms. Bonhomme. How often do these odour incidents occur?
We haven't had any odour incidences or that I've experienced for quite a while until these recent ones. It's been fairly quiet, and it's been very good, as a matter of fact.
So how many odour incidents occurred recently?
I'm saying about 4, I think. Yes.
Okay. Over what period?
Just over a week. Where have I got it here?
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
The 8th, the 9th, the 14th and the 23rd of March.
Okay, thank you.
Reworks, yeah. But up till then, for quite a while, we hadn't been bothered by it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bonhomme. Mr. Lundy, I think you want to respond to those. Thank you, Mr. Bonhomme. And I'll take a question from Councillor Anderson and we'll move on.
Thank you. Just 2 quick points. Firstly, Ginger's Roadhouse right opposite is a location where nearly all of our competitors pull up to fuel and receive food, etc., on their way through. There's a lot more odorous product than we would carry at any one time goes past than we carry. And secondly, most of that transferring of product is going up to Mouchet anyway. We are addressing the problem. We've agreed. So I'm not sure what we're arguing about.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, the last question.
In fact, those are the things I wanted answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Could I just say that we didn't know what Mr. Lundy...
Okay, well, you know now. Thank you, Ms. Bonhomme. Thank you. Councillors, that takes care of all the deputations. Councillor McGrath. Yeah. Can I ask me a question?
Right. The question is, Mr. Mayor, that is it not true that from a procedural point of view that the opposition, those who are opposed, would speak first, and either the proponent or the operators would have a chance to hear what the opposition or what they would and they would answer the questions. In this case, it was the opposite way around. Is that correct?
I don't know, Ms. Albright, we've had that. It's almost the first in, best dressed, isn't it? I don't know if there's any hard and fast rule.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Lundy was the first to request to make a deputation on this item, and then Ms. Bonhomme followed. So it wasn't a deliberate action to put those 2 deputations in that order.
That's a simple answer. This is not an application, it's just a council's motion, so the order in which they came was the first to arrive.
We did cover a whole lot of ground that wasn't related to the motion. Thank you. All right, that's it, Councillor. We now move on to questions. There are no officers with the presentation, so we'll go to questions. And first off, let's see who's first through the lot here, is probably deal with the planning items first. So Mr. Russell and Mr. Vanderlind. Yeah, I got them. Okay, Councillor Catalano, you were first.
Yes, thanks. Look, I wanted a bit more clarification about the aged proposal, or the aged, and that's up at Evelyn Reserve in Middle Swan. And basically, I'm still not clear as to what's going to happen with the stormwater. Well, I just wanted to know where the water is going to end up.
It's 4.10, 276. 276 is the page, Mr. Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I've got the item in front of me. In relation to the question, look, it's generally the case, and this is probably already well known to councillors perhaps, most drainage eventually is discharged into some form of watercourse that eventually in some form finds its way out to the ocean. That's the fundamental basis for most of the drainage arrangements that we have. So certainly in this instance here, it will be connected up to our system, our pipe system, and our pipe system will ultimately discharge that. In many instances, that those sorts of outflows in this location, of course, go into our creek system and our river system, and eventually flows out into the ocean. So, in this instance, I suppose the difference is we don't have necessarily a direct discharge into a watercourse. It will go into a pipe system, and that will take it basically along the avenues that I've explained.
So, thanks for that. But does that mean that it's going to end up in the Blackadder Creek, for instance, or is it going to end up? Where is it going to end up, and where is it likely to end up in terms of where is it going to be piped and come out and discharge into the creek system? That's what I was.
Well, through Mr. Mayor, as Mr. Pell intimated, I'm not. We haven't got the connection point there. I don't have the drainage plans. They would have to defer to my colleague Mr. Caton around that. But it will, as you can see, it will hook up into the Midland drainage network, into our pipe system, and ultimately wherever that discharges out.
And so the proponent was talking about some kind of I don't know, settling ponds or something like that, or something. I mean, I can't imagine that that's going to be the case, is it? I mean, is it just not going to just go into a pipe and then end up? Yeah. How is it? I mean, because that's not what I'm saying. So we've got this. Well, what have we got? Water compensation. Is it going to go into a pipe? What is going to happen with the water?
No, I mean, look, you're quite right, Mr. Mayor. I think Mr. Pell alluded to. I think he was describing a reference to a compensating basin, which is just as its name implies, is effectively a holding basin for a large amount of water that then eventually is controlled and it's detained and controlled and it's discharged out into a pipe system. Again, he did intimate that. I'm not familiar, certainly, with the development of this size, which is an urban development. Most of the large compensating basins we have in our drainage network are generally associated with sites many, many times larger than this. The examples being some of the large transport depot warehouse facilities we have in Hazelmere before we're putting in the system, and that had, hectares of impermeable concrete and roofing, and we had comp basins in that. I'd find it surprising that you would get something like that in terms of a development of this size, but again, he did make that comment.
Well, the reason why that is because there's a threatened ecological community adjacent to this site, and that is like it's an acknowledged threatened ecological community. So it's actually, I think that's why there's discussion in there about, you know, protecting that site from either, you know, increased water levels or, in fact, any kind of pollutants going into that. So that's why I'm interested in it, because, you know, it's a valuable asset for the City of Swan to have that kind of ecological, it's a floral community there. Anyway, so I just wanted finally just to ask you a little bit more about when it comes back for a building permit, because there was quite a lot of, I got the idea that both the acoustic aspect that was the submitter made a sort of complaint about or opposed it on that grounds, and the stormwater was going to be sort of dealt with in a building permit. And I just wondered, is there any way that council or a councillor would be able to be given some information before that building permit was actually assessed and granted, or however it's done? Or is that something that you're just going to go off and do without council oversight?
Through Mr Mayor, if we take the building permit, will only address the Building Code of Australia issues and the Building Act issues. For example, we do have a lot of conditions where they basically articulate what's to be done, by whom, and at what point in the process. And if I take you, for an example, to Condition 8, it says prior to the lodgement of a building permit application. That isn't meant to say that when they lodge their building permit application, they have all of those plans, because that's not what the building permit process is about. It just simply means that that's the point in which they're required to lodge the further information. So Condition 8 references the need to prepare and have approved by us a drainage management plan for the stormwater system. And that drainage management plan, as Condition 8 also says, to have that plan approved to our satisfaction as the city, with advice from the Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions. So in relation to that drainage arrangement, that can be referred to that agency for comment, and if their concern is they don't want to see any direct discharge into any surrounding waterways, etc., then that's the point where that issue will be examined, and that agency can see that the drainage plan doesn't do that, and it's acceptable.
That's something that the city's likely to do when that for that condition to be met, is likely to refer that to DEWA.
That's right. That's what the condition requires. So before the point in which Mr. Dopel's firm does up their working drawings for a building permit stage, and they get their engineers to design their stormwater drainage system, they will lodge those plans with us. We'll look at that and we'll refer it off to the DBCA, very long-winded name for an agency that used to just be called the Department of Water, as the Deputy Mayor's correctly identified, and purely for the purposes of assuring them that their concerns, as you've quite rightly noted, around water quality and the surrounding environment, that the drainage system that's being proposed won't adversely impact that.
Councillor Coley, you're next.
A question to the CEO, I think, instead of Mr. Russell. Unless the slip lane to the shopping centre at Chiara is your area, Mr. Russell, is that? No.
The operations room. Let's get this going. Councillor Johnson, you're next.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I've got questions about 4 items in section 4 for Mr. Russell. Should I do them all? Okay. Question relating to 4.8, which is Stirling Street in Guildford, the application. Is that one not... so, councillors, that's page 251, additions to the existing restaurant at number 24 Stirling Street. Is this one not a retrospective application?
Through Mr. Mayor, yes, it is. The building in question is clearly there.
Yeah, I just wonder, does it actually say in the report that it's retrospective? I guess it's a relevant consideration.
Through Mr Mayor, if we look at the key issues, no, there's nothing that expressly indicates that it is an application that has been made retrospectively.
Right. But it is.
It most certainly is, yes.
All right, okay. And I guess the understanding is that this application and the recommendation relates to the garden centre and not the cafe, or the cafe, not the garden centre, whichever one it is. So we've got an approved cafe, but we've got an unapproved garden centre. So the extension relates to the approved cafe.
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's correct, yes.
Okay, I've got a question. And I guess the history of this is that the previous application and approval was also for retrospective situation
for
the cafe.
For the restaurant approved cafe, yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is that all the questions you had?
For this particular one, yes, sorry, Mr Mayor. I drove a long way today, so I might be a bit tired. 4.13. This is basically the telecommunications tower. I've just got a question there. It appears that the additional use is for to put up a single telecommunications tower in a designated area, but the application shows the additional use covers the entire golf course. Is that correct? Scheme amendment, yeah.
Through you, Mr Mayor, because the land to which the scheme amendment proposal relates is lot 1003, and that's the golf course. The additional use, if we can see the proposed draft of it, into the schedule for the additional uses in Schedule 2. The construct of the amendment simply has the description of the land, lot 1003, on the appropriate plan for Dallow Drive, the Vines, which of course is the whole of the golf course, and then the additional use of telecommunications infrastructure. I suppose it is possible that if council thought it desirable to be a little bit more precise in where the telecommunications facility or which part of lot 1003 it might apply to, it could seek to perhaps try and refine that in the conditions column. It's open, and that might come out through the formal public advertising if the council resolves to proceed with the amendment, Mr Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Look, that's all on that one. If I can go back to 4.5, this is the Bellevue Land Use Study, which is on page 168, councillors. A question relating to the Bellevue tree planting programme, and I think I don't know whether this one falls within your area. Maybe it looks like Mr Van der Lind. As you know, the Bellevue Residents and Ratepayers Association maintain that in exchange for giving up Good Child Oval, which was public open space to itself for $1.6 million, that money they expected was going to be spent on a number of beautification projects in Bellevue, one of which was the tree planting programme. And obviously there has been a tree planting programme, but the question is, if we went ahead with the Bellevue Residents and Ratepayers Association's requested approach to simply plant a tree outside every residential property where there was not yet a tree, what would be the effect of that? What do we see the outcome?
Mr Coates' question.
Through you, Mr Mayor, and Councillor Johnson, you'll probably remember that at the time, because the ward councils were involved in that, there was quite a lot of consultation with that group around planting of trees, and there were people who were absolutely adamant that they didn't want one in front of their house. So for a variety of reasons, they liked to park vehicles on there, didn't want the leaves, etc. So in the city's experience, when somebody doesn't want a verge tree on their verge and one is put there, its survival rate isn't as high as areas where people do want one.
I guess one question, I'm just wondering if there's some middle ground here. So at the moment it's a tree on request and nobody's asking for them. Previously the city took a more proactive approach to propose to people that they might like a tree. and didn't get much of a response. Is there anything more that could be done proactively to go to residents who don't have a tree and say, look, we really can give you a tree? I mean, last time we just wrote to them. Is there anything further that could be done?
Through you, Mr Mayor, initially we did write to them and advise them if they wanted to have a tree and were they willing to water it, and then and we got a number of people who said yes, but subsequent to that, you will recall council added some money to the budget for watering trees, and so then we went back to people again after that and said, do you want a street tree, and the city will water it, and an increased number came back then. So the ones who said no have been given the offer of a tree being planted for free and the city watering it and maintaining it for 2 years, but they still don't want one. So I think in that particular case, we probably have taken it as far as we can.
Yeah, thank you very much for that answer. Next question relates to the lighting audit. So the Bellevue Residents and Ratepayers Association say they've asked many times for the result of the lighting audit, and I'm aware there are some lighting issues in Bellevue. Can Mr Mayor, through you, could any member of staff comment on that? Perhaps not Mr Russell's department again.
Mr Mayor, through you, the lighting audit was done by Mr. Coaten's team. My recollection of it was that the audit was done for the whole of Bellevue, and that those results, are available internally for staff, and they are using that results to program the improvement of lighting in the area at the moment.
Yes, the question is, can councillors have a copy of that?
I will have to defer to Mr. Coaten on that.
Yeah, there's nothing confidential about it as far as I'm aware. I haven't personally received a request from it, but yeah, we can share that with council.
Thank you very much. And I guess the next question is, I think Bellis, I'm looking here at Precinct 3, was expecting an R40 zoning maximum, but now I think we're proposing R60. Can Mr Van der Linde explain the rationale?
Mr Mayor, through you, it's actually the opposite. In Bellis, the section in Precinct 3, just south of the highway service zone, was identified as future R60 densities. And then subsequent to the Bellis report, the city approved the housing strategy, and at that point it was determined that an R60 zoning for that area is actually not appropriate, and that an R40 be kept. So what happened there is that section that was identified as potential R60 was kept at R40, and the rest of the precinct was already rezoned to a dual coding of R20 to R40. So for Precinct 3, the rezonings have already been concluded and completed.
Thank you. My next question is about parks in Bellevue. In the document we've been given by the Bellevue Residents and Ratepayers Association, it says that Bellevue does not have a park at all. Is that correct? Maybe Mr Coaten comment on that? I seem to think there are 3.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, I'm trying to find the document you're referring to. The
document that was distributed by Ms Arvino, in which they say, Precinct 6, Todd Park improvement, amend from complete to ongoing because Bellevue does not have a park at all. An effort should continue to rectify this.
Todd Park is a park. There's the old station park, I think, in that area as well. I think perhaps they're referring to irrigated parks. We've certainly had some discussion with the group in that area, and the issue there is, as councillors are aware, is water allocation.
Could Todd Park be a dry park, a bush type park?
Well, yeah, that's essentially what it is at the moment. We have had a number of discussions with the Bellevue Residents and Ratepayers Association in relation to possible upgrading plans for that park, and there's differing views on it. There is a strong desire to have it irrigated, but the issue is we just don't have the water for it.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Henderson, you're next.
Thank you. I have a number. 4.6, Mr. Russell. The density being proposed of 30 through 60, I don't think I got a solid enough answer from the proponents because I'm concerned that it will ultimately all be almost 60. But is there any planning process to get some balance on what those lot sizes might be that we have and we can implement?
Through Mr Mayor, look, as the applicant has said, it's certainly been a trend over the last decade or so where what the Commission seeks to do is to build a fair degree of flexibility and responsiveness to structure plans by simply not delineating precisely the coded areas, but to simply have a range. Now, I think it's fair to say, and even though you didn't hear it directly from the proponents, what they'll say is that they'll produce or seek to have whatever product that they think responds to the market demand and they can sell. So they've talked about the range there, R30 to R60, for example, the extent of how much R60 or R30 they will have. Generally, the high densities are a smaller percentage of the makeup. If they say they're bulk, and they did talk about it being more of a traditional product estate, they'll probably have a bulk at the lower end, like R30 to R40, and they might have a few smaller R60 lots clustered around certain appropriate locations next to public open space and the rest of it. But the days of being able to say in a structure plan that this is your R60 area and this is your R30 area and that's the quantum you get of one and the quantum you get of the other are done and dusted. The Commission likes to keep it open. So at the end of the day, they basically nominate at the subdivision stage for these lots what coding's going to go with them.
Yeah, I figured that'd be the answer. Thank you. The next question is the R20 zoning onto Henley Brook Ave. Is there any correlation between lot density and the need to provide noise mitigation from the road? That might be a Mr. Coaten question.
Through Mr Mayor, not generally. I mean, certainly as our report says there, the district structure plan originally, as a result of, at that point, thought it appropriate to have a lower density of lot type. But the Commission made the judgment call on that with the earlier structure plan, the previous one. So we'd indicated here, well, look, okay, whilst it's a departure from what the district structure plan originally proposed, there's already been a decision on it. They've stuck to R20, generally for noise mitigation. If most of it doesn't require any sound walls or the rest of it, or bunding, or the rest of it's merely just the quiet house design. So the size of the lot doesn't necessarily make any difference there.
Thank you. Going through to 4.13. I did raise a question earlier with the lady, what's her name, Mrs. Arvino, I think it was, but obviously it was someone else I was talking to. Are we at a point where we should be looking at hidden antennas for telecommunications infrastructure, such as they're doing in the UK, particularly in a place like the Vines, that is a rural open vista? Are we in a position to be able to say, well, we would like to have that kind of hidden antenna system?
Through Mr Mayor, when this country deregulated the telecommunications industry some 20 odd years ago, and whole new networks launched their product into Perth, and local governments across the board tried to introduce or dealt with concerns around EME and visual impact. There were some examples in not this local government but others where they sought to disguise a telecommunications pole as a tree. I think at the end the verdict on that was it was a little bit ridiculous, and that a telecommunications tower is a telecommunications tower. It certainly isn't a tree, and you shouldn't try and fake it, so to speak. You can, of course, and I think Councillor Henderson's email examples that I did see did show certain instances of antennas. I think there might have been some instances of antennas attempted to be I don't know whether grafted is the right word, or attached to what look like real trees or fake trees. Of course, yes, there's an example there. Of course, the council could. I think at the end of the day, we seem to have, the state of play in 2021, the second decade of the 21st century in a highly digitalised environment is simply this. This infrastructure is recognised as part of our urban fabric. It is ubiquitous, it is commonplace, and the notion of looking at it and thinking it's out of place is now almost been disregarded. And that would even extend, I think, into rural areas. You see these telecommunication facilities in all sorts of environments. Perhaps if you were trying to introduce a telecommunications facility into a World Heritage natural landscape, you might be looking at trying to fake it. But of course, it's up to the council. You could look at all of this, but certainly I haven't seen. It seems to me in the rollout of telecommunications infrastructure, the days of proponents or telecommunication carriers endeavouring to render their infrastructure looking like a fake tree or a fake whatever seems to have departed. Maybe overseas in other countries it's not the case, but certainly in Western Australia we seem to have departed from that. Doesn't mean, of course, Mr Mayor, that if council's mindful to do it in the vines, it can mandate that through a condition perhaps on the amendment if it seeks to do so.
Thanks for that short answer, Phil.
Thank you.
Further question?
Yes, I've got a bit more. So just to make a point,
was it a question or a statement?
The EME issues that Mr Russell raised, I'm not concerned with, but the visual impact, particularly in that environment, I am. So I will be discussing with you a possible amendment to look at that. Just want to be clear, given that the amendment is for the zoning over all of that area, this could be the first of a number of towers. So it could be at any point across the site. So I think it's time to have a look at this and to see what we can do with it. So I'm sorry if I seem to be getting into a debate, Mr Mayor.
Yep, you are.
4.16. Can I get some indication from you, Mr Russell? Looking at a Google map of the area, it would seem to me as though the building envelopes have been put pretty much in the middle of most of the lots to make it such that you can pretty well not see a neighbour. Would you agree that's the objective pretty much of that zone, or it seems to me?
Through Mr Mayor, largely yes. Certainly some of these envelopes that are designated, these are squarish sort of blocks that you can see in question here. Certainly the building envelopes do seem to have been put in all of that. We've got to remember, of course, that the Brigadoon estate was designed now in the early 1980s by the then Bond Corporation. And so perhaps the notion of having a hidden retreat out in the bush, and at that point in time, of course, Brigadoon was quite far removed from everywhere else. The notion of perhaps having it settled away there where you didn't have to see your neighbours might have been a design factor at the time, but I think we can see these days, and more increasingly with the paramount need for fire mitigation, that more and more people perhaps are less worried about whether or not they can see their neighbours. They're perhaps more worried about whether or not the trees surrounding their houses are causing them undue risk.
So are you suggesting to me, Mr Russell, that we have no interest in enforcing building envelopes in the area?
Through Mr Mayor, I remember a discussion 10 years ago with a senior member of the Federal Department of the Environment, Heritage and Water, where I said the primacy of fire mitigation in the Avon Ridge Estate and Brigadoon is going to mean the keeping of native vegetation and your environmental considerations are going to come unapologetically second fiddle to fire safety. So my own personal view is that fire safety comes first, and whether or not you get to see your neighbours across the road or over the back fence or the like comes a very distant second, Mr Mayor.
So, Mr Russell, I don't have any argument with you there. I just want to be sure that if we're going to apply the rule to one, should we not apply it to all, and what are we going to do in terms of dealing with that?
Through Mr Mayor, as I was conversing with my colleague Mr Vanderlinde, we couldn't help but notice that the photographs that Mr Kaporn I think, produced did seem to indicate there's a fair bit less vegetation on his lot more recently than the past. So, look, perhaps quite understandably, many residents are clearing more vegetation than what is within their building envelope. But again, my own point of view, Mr Mayor, is do we want to be taking issue with people who present to us and say, I'm trying to keep my family and my house safe if I clear a few extra trees?
I just want to be sure, Mr Mayor, that we have a policy or a process that's equal for everyone. Thank you.
Councillor Scanlon, you've been waiting a while.
That's okay. Councillor Johnson asked my question.
Okay. Councillor Coley.
Thank you, Mayor. In regard to Almar's 4.7, it seems to me that they may be looking to relocate all WC facilities to these outside container vessels. Was there any indication, are these toilets over and above their existing WC needs, or are they looking to relocate, create more room internally in the existing building by relocating all WC buildings outside? Is there any indication of that?
Through Mr Mayor, certainly no, there isn't. The applicant, when we quizzed them on this, because at first it seemed like they were presenting these extra bar facilities and toilet facilities almost as if they were special events, and of course Almar's used to, I don't know whether they still do, used to make a thing of Oktoberfest as a special event where they get some extra crowds. But they've advised us that no, they're simply making this as extra bar facilities outside and with the extra toilet facilities. It was intimated that, of course, as we know some time ago when we had the COVID restrictions, simply having large crowds within smaller confined spaces, both in terms of bar area inside and toilet areas, can present an issue. So certainly they're looking at having, they've got a large area of land, as we all know. They're looking at having these facilities out there as addition rather than as a replacement facilities for the removal of toilets inside. So no, it's definitely an addition.
Okay, 4.13, the Vines Telecommunications Tower. Is there any requirement for it to be, apart from easy access, behind the main building and near the maintenance sheds or anything? Could it be somewhere on the third hole or something? Does it have to be somewhere not so close to where people are working? Because that seemed to be a concern of the people presenting.
Through Mr Mayor, I think it's important to note that as has probably been raised already, the actual amendment, the additional use is being proposed over the whole of Lot 1003, so which is all of the golf course area. When they actually come to submit a development application, they'll more precisely articulate where that is. As I understand it, they've nominated this location because this is the location where the proponents have secured, as I understand it, a lease arrangement with the owners. I suppose if they could get a lease arrangement somewhere else that still provided them with the same coverage, you might be able to look at having it somewhere else. But that's been the determinant as to their proposal, saying anomaly, this is where we want to place it.
Would it be reasonable to propose an amendment which ensures that we take it away from existing buildings or somewhere central in the golf course area, that away from buildings? Would that be possible?
Well, through Mr Mayor, it'd certainly be possible, because there's nothing in the amendment that's being proposed that actually says we want to have the additional use only for this particular site. So the council can look at, even before it initiates it, it can modify the actual amendment in terms of the conditions to maybe specify a particular location or criteria that it wants to have in place for when it evaluates a DA. If that is not within certain distances of a house, etc., it can certainly do that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. In regards to the slip lane for Chiara, I'll just through Mr Coaten, if that's all right. Mr Coaten, the slip lane Chiara, it looks to me that they might have got the cart before the horse in terms of they haven't done any proper traffic modelling on the...
It's okay this morning. He's got a couple of questions. How many questions you got?
Well...
In regards to this one?
One or two?
Just outside there, John, for a second.
Well, I think even if a traffic consultant had looked at that, they would probably arrive at the similar conclusions that the staff did in relation to that configuration.
But they haven't had a look at it.
The gentleman said that they hadn't, so take him at his word.
Would we have the in-house capability to assess that? Well, you've already assessed it, I suppose, so that probably answers that already. That's probably all on that one, thank you. And just on to the CEO, if I could, Mayor, on C1.5, the proposed letter to Bitchatec, what sort of staff time or cost would be involved in sending them a letter?
Oh, I mean, just time taken to write the letter as part of normal duties, Councillor Kylie.
Oh, it appears that it's already written in the motion anyway, so we'd effectively just be sending the letter then. Just with regard to a follow-up site visit as part of that process, would that be normal when you would receive complaints about emissions or the like, something that would be not conforming to the approved use? Would that be a normal process anyway?
Yeah, normal process to follow up with inspections.
Okay. And is there anything objectionable in the letter that's being proposed? In terms of what normal process for the staff would be?
Not that I can see, but from a compliance perspective, I would refer to Mr Bandolin to see whether there was anything that he can see from the development proposal on site that would be controversial, but it wouldn't appear to be.
And effectively, we're only asking them if they are carrying out certain activities. Thank you.
Councillor Congleton.
On the same item, through you, Mr Mayor, to the CEO, how many compliance officers do we have currently?
I would need to ask Mr Vandalin to respond to that, Councillor Congleton.
Mr Mayor, through you, we've got 4.
And another question, of those 4 compliance officers, do they go to all post-planning application sites to check on the conditions?
No, definitely not. We don't have the capacity to do that.
Councillor Lucas.
Thank you. In relation, more a comment, I think, on the telecommunications, the Vine. I think Ms Webber, in a deputation, said she was more worried about potential health risks than amenity issues, and that's why she said her husband is working close by. So I take that what you say, Mr Russell. This doesn't define a particular area, but it's the area that the Vines, the owners of land, have defined as where they would find it appropriate, and it'd be up to the telecommunications company to find another area. But I do take on what Councillor Henderson said, that I was driving past telecommunications in towers in Europe and didn't recognise them because they blended in with the surrounding trees. So I think it's a way to look at in the future. I had a question on 5.5, but I'll speak to Mr Coaten after that. I'll be moving a alternative if the costings work out. And with the second, well, I was going to say second house, but with the house on Dulcify Court, can you tell me, Mr Russell, is that a residential building there? I mean, it's listed as a shed, but to me, the photograph looks like it's got a lawned area, it's got solar panels on it. Is it being used as a residence at the moment, do you know?
Through Mr Mayor, I'm not aware. I take the point being made. It certainly was approved as a shed, not as a residence or even for temporary accommodation. I'm not aware at the moment whether or not that is actually being resided in or not.
Because I thought there was an application for a second residence on the property when I first looked at the photographs, and I can see why they want to come off Coonamarra Drive, because the driveway, which they want to construct, will be a lot shorter than coming off Dulcify. So I'll take up Councillor Congleton's suggestion, have a site visit during the week. Thank you.
Councillor McNamara.
4.13, Mr. Ross's floor, with regard to Ms. Webber's statement from the plan that Councillor Lucas has taken a little bit of my thunder with this situation, but she did mention that she was concerned about the impact of the actual anyway. Like, long story short, she said that she would prefer it be moved 500 metres away. Did we not in past have a deputation of the geniuses in the electronic and radiation situation? They tell us that the further away you get, the actual radiation is deemed to be there gets actually stronger, that you're better off to be underneath these towers rather than 500 metres away.
Through Mr Mayor, I can't quite recall. I know we've probably had lots of presentations from applicants over the years. I don't know. I think on occasion we have had presentations, certainly where they will show you a graphical representation of the extent of the EME, I'll call it plume, which is a bit like if you visualise a gas flare from a gas tower, and they show how that goes out from the antennas mounted on the tower. So obviously, if you're at the base of the tower, you're showing a position where you're not in any particular EME exposure at all. I don't recall there's anyone suggesting to say that, you know, the further you remove it from a situation, the better or worse it gets. I do know we've had presentations from many RF engineers where they say the problem about siting further away is that your coverage is affected, and they've often said that if you it just then means that you end up having to have more towers to interconnect to provide the coverage network, rather than having an appropriately sized tower, appropriately placed where you can get the most bang for your buck, so to speak. But I can't recall anyone sort of speaking directly around the extent of moving it around in locations and what that means in terms of EME exposure.
Were we also told that these particular ET or telephone companies would actually, they have the power to do whatever they like, and they will actually put the tower where they actually find to be the most advantageous for them, and that is, irrespective of what we do and what we say, they get their way.
Through you, Mr Mayor, well, you've certainly heard from our lawyers where you can pretty much take it as gospel truth in Western Australia that you're not going to sustain a refusal of an application for a telecommunications facility, because EME has been said there's no evidence to say it has an adverse impact or the levels of exposure within the appropriate guidelines. And they've also said, as I just going back to the phrase I used previously, now they're so ubiquitous in our environments, both urban and rural, that the notion of looking at something, I mean, most of the SAT decisions will say, yes, person A, B or C will see a bit of this telco tower. Yes, it may slightly spoil to some extent their rural outlook, but balancing up the impact on person A, B or C versus the greater public good of this infrastructure, it is in as many words, Mr Mayor, no contest. And yes, I quite agree. You don't see any SAT applications for review against a local government's decision to refuse a telco tower in 2021 getting up.
Councillor Henderson.
Just to be clear, you pick this thing up and stick it next to your head, you're going to get absolutely blasted like you wouldn't believe in terms of EME compared to what you get from a tower.
Yeah, okay, so we're getting into debate discussion.
I'm just giving you a little bit of...
yeah, we've got all that.
So that's why I said when I started that I wasn't concerned about the EME.
Are there any further questions for Mr Russell on the agenda?
I do have a question.
Councillor Coley. Oh, you have got a question?
I do have a question about the Dulcet Court Brigadoon. Is a second house or even a bungalow or the like allowed on those properties?
Through Mr Mayor, you can have ancillary accommodation for these things there, from my recollection, because we actually rezoned Brigadine to now make it special rural. And from my recollection, you can't have a group dwelling or a second dwelling, but you can have ancillary accommodation. But I'll have to check that.
Thank you. And they're asking for a second crossover and I think that would accommodate that. My question is, if they can have a second crossover, it's probably to Mr Coton, would we ask them to install and maintain it, or would that be at our cost?
We only provide a contribution for the first crossover at a property.
So it's their problem. Thank you.
Councillor Coley.
Back to the Vines Telecommunications Tower, Mayor. I'm just interested in the process. We're not actually putting forward a proposal for a telecommunications tower. It's a amendment to the local planning scheme to allow it. But I'm just interested in, if it went to SAT, would the application to SAT be that we have to accept the amendment, or would there's two things here. There's the amendment and there's the tower, and if we refuse this application, this 4.13, I thought we would have strong grounds to refuse it overall in SAT.
Through Mr Mayor, I think it's important to note, this is a scheme amendment proposal, and the SAT won't get involved with it, as opposed to if it was a development application. So they'll only be able to approve a development application if at the end of the day the scheme is amended to provide it. So the first port of call here is the council can decide. If at the end of the day it goes, you know what, there seems to be people that aren't interested in it, we won't support it. It can resolve next week not to support it, and that's it. What would happen there, I suppose, is that the proponent can't go to the SAT. They'd have to go to the minister and lobby the minister to have the minister direct us, in the interests of supposedly the public good, to amend our scheme to enable a telecommunications tower to be built there. Certainly if that happened, or if the council initiates this if it initiates it next week, then assuredly the final call will be with the minister. If it doesn't initiate it next week, then that's it. It would take the minister to direct us to amend the scheme. So you're actually in the strongest position as a local government to decide whether or not you provide this for the community or don't. And the SAT won't get involved. The SAT will only get involved at a development application stage, and we're one step away from that at this point.
Any further planning questions? Yeah, we'll get to Mr Coton shortly. Okay, thank you, Mr Russell, for the time being. Okay, any questions of Ms Lay on any of the financial questions? No? Good. Mr Chance? Okay. Mr Coton? Got some questions for you, apparently. Councillor Catalano.
So I just wanted to get to the footpath. There was one where there was going to be a footpath. Which one is it now? Oh, here we go. 5.1, the footpath at Talbot Road, Hazelmere. Have you got any idea what kind of vegetation is going to be knocked over for the footpath? Seems there's quite a few, or at least there was one submission where they said that they didn't think that the footpath was necessary. So I was just wondering, what kind of vegetation is going to be knocked over for the footpath? Thanks.
Yeah, not to hand. I'll have to take that on notice.
Okay. Could you be able to give me that for the next meeting? Thank you. And going back to the Kiara one, with the left in, the left in slip lane, would there be the same amount of safety issues with the left in slip lane rather than, I could understand that the right hand crossover or the right-hand kind of, entrance, or is going to be, more dangerous. But would the left-hand slip lane have as many safety issues?
Yeah. So the safety issues with the slip lane, the left-hand slip lane, is ideally when you have a slip lane, there's only one way out of it. So in this particular case, if you look at the page 456, count with the gentleman's plans.
Yeah.
So when you pull into the left-hand slip lane, if you're going to be turning left up at the intersection, could be some vehicles turning into the first crossover. There could also be some vehicles pulling out of there and turning left as well. Likewise with the second crossover, so vehicles could be slowing down to pull into there. So if you're travelling along that slip lane, you won't, and if someone's got their indicator on to turn left, you won't know if they're going to turn left at the first crossover, the second crossover, or up at the intersection. And so that can result in, it's quite common that results in rear-end accidents.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, all right, thanks for that.
Any further questions? Mr Coaten? Councillor Coley?
On the same point, Mayor, Mr Coaten, if I could point you to Gradiston Highway where you access Midland Mowers. You turn left into Midland Mowers there, but just a little bit further up you can turn left into Farrell Road. That looks very similar to the way this is laid out, and I wondered whether there would be something like that Midland Mowers exit, Farrell Road exit, that could be applied here.
There would be situations throughout the city, throughout the whole metropolitan area, where there are crossovers on left turn slip lanes, but the fact that there are other ones doesn't make them safe.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, just another Bellevue question relating to one of the points made by the Bellevue Residents and Ratepayers Association regarding Helen Street. So the association says in Helen Street only 8 out of a possible 18 street trees have been planted, and Helen Street, at least the portion they're talking about, is relatively short. I'm just wondering, I don't know if this is a question for Mr Coaten or maybe for the CEO, if a councillor were to go and knock on the doors of those houses where they don't have a street tree and ask them, would that be getting involved in administration if they wanted a tree? So would that be a prohibited activity?
I have to be careful about how I answer this question, but I believe that may have already occurred.
To me, councillors.
Councillor Lucas.
Yes, going back to the left-hand slip lane at the Chiara Shopping Centre. Jim, I take your point that it may cause some accidents, but local traffic generally adapt very easily. So I'll be putting up an alternative motion on this item subject to costings. But if you are in the left-hand slip lane, you're obviously turning left. Either it's into the first driveway, the second driveway, or into Bottle Brush Drive when you get to the intersection. So if you're in the slip lane, you're going to be turning. The only issue becomes of vehicles coming out of the shopping centre and wishing to turn left to proceed east onto Morley Drive. They won't be sure, perhaps 100% sure, but that happens on Benara Road at the intersection of Beachborough anyhow. You've got slip lane that goes into Hungry Jack's Kentucky Fried Chicken, the first driveway of the petrol station and the second driveway of the petrol station. Local traffic very quickly say, I've got to make sure that this bloke's not going to turn before or after me. So I'll speak to you about that. But what I really want to know is, and it might be difficult to see from here, but I did attend there yesterday, and there's a petrol tanker parked across, blocking access, because the only way you can get to the Chiara Food Hall and the pharmacy, if you're coming from the west, is to turn into Bottle Brush Drive, drive through the Puma station, and access it via this connecting driveway. but that was completely blocked yesterday for several hours by a fuel truck with the driver standing there. So I actually had to exit the petrol station, do a U-turn at the corner of Bottlebrush, go down to Northmore, do another U-turn, and then come back to the shopping centre. So there's got to be a better answer to it, and I'll speak to you after the meeting to find a solution. Won't be the perfect solution, but it's got to be better than what we've got. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, just going back to my previous question, I really would like some advice on that, because even if someone else has already done this, it's a very short street, and it would be easy for a councillor to walk along Ellen Street and just determine whether anybody else wanted a street tree. But I'm concerned it's
Why don't you have a
operation.
discussion with the CEO on that tomorrow?
So, I'm asking on my behalf, if I do that, am I getting involved in administration? I'm asking if I did it, would it be a problem?
Yeah, as advised, I think it would be delving into administration matters. If that's the desire of you as a councillor, then we can certainly take that on board and try and accommodate that through the administration.
All right, okay, thank you. So I should not do it.
Mr Bishop, I don't think you've got anything on the agenda, have you? Oh, you have. Okay, is there any questions for Mr Bishop on that one? Councillor Johnson.
Just a question about the commercial arrangement for the parking machines for the street parking. Are those machines owned by the city, or are they leased, or are they there on some kind of a I don't know, fee for service basis?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'd have to take that on notice. I'm not actually sure whether we own them or lease them. I don't want to give the wrong answer to that, but I'd like to double check that.
And I guess the other question is, which will probably require that answer to be answered first, so you'll have to take this one on notice, is there any way to improve the way those machines have notices on them that explain that you've got free parking, but you have to press this squiggly button, then that squiggly button, and then this other squiggly button to get your free ticket? Is it possible to improve that? I guess, could we ask the manufacturer if there's something can be done? Or can we put a notice on the machine explaining it in plain English?
Through you, Mr Mayor, obviously these machines are used at a number of locations, so the instructions are consistent with the instructions that are used in other locations throughout the metro area, but we can certainly provide feedback if there's concern. I'm not aware of particular concerns from users, but certainly if there are, we can refer those through. Obviously the signage will be redone anyway if council adopts the recommendations in the reports.
I guess what I'm thinking of is, at the moment, you've got to press 2 or 3 different hieroglyphic type buttons, which there's no real explanation of what they are except in very small print. Could we not just have one button that says press here for free ticket? Would that be achievable?
I can take that on notice and certainly take it with the supplier, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Thank
That
you, Mr
leaves
Bishop.
Ms Albright. Councillors, Ms Albright's got CEO Recruitment Performance Review, and that's it, isn't it? Or you got something else? That's it. Councillor Johnson.
I've got a question about 8.1. It's a procedural question.
Well, I'm asking if you've got any questions to Mr Albright on this one.
Was under the impression that 8.1, which is the annual meeting of electors, motion was probably under Ms Albright's list. No?
Probably is, yeah. Okay, we'll ask it. Yeah.
Okay, the first question is, there are 34 motions, of which one motion I have a proximity interest. Am I allowed to ask any questions about 8.1?
I think so.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I have actually been contemplating this for you, Councillor Johnson, as the meeting has occurred. Normally, if you've got a proximity interest, you wouldn't be able to participate in an item. I think for item 8.1, my recommendation to the council would be that, given that this is one motion out of 34 motions, that the council might like to consider giving Councillor Johnson the ability to participate in the vote on this matter, it would be open to you to limit the extent of that participation. So, for example, you could say that Councillor Johnson could participate in this matter on all motions apart from motion 4, and you could separate out motion 4 in the council resolution so that Councillor Johnson may participate on the other parts of this item.
Thank you. That's a good answer. But I guess the question is, in this agenda forum, given that we've not yet resolved that way and we can't resolve that way because we're not in a council meeting, can I ask any more questions, or if I asked a question, would I have to then leave the room?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I believe it would be fine to ask a question about any motion in item 8.1 except for motion 4.
Okay, fair enough. I guess in that case it's a kind of a procedural track question about the whole thing. Given there's 34 motions, and previously when we've attempted to deal with such a large number by a series of amendments, would it not be better just to split it up into 34 different agenda items so we can run through them one at a time? We say a limit on speaking of, I don't know, a minute a councillor, something like that.
34 motions on top of the entire agenda you got here. I think that answers the question. That'd be up to council, I guess.
So I guess another question then: should we have a special meeting of council to deal with each of these items?
Yes, we should. That's up to council too.
Okay, so I can put forward. Is it reasonable, given the circumstances I'm in, to put forward a alternate
Councillor, do you
motion?
want to do it? If you want to do it, do it. Right?
Well, I'm asking.
That's my opinion.
No, I'm not asking. Oh, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm asking for legal advice. Is it a reasonable thing for me to do?
Well, that's going to be up to council too, isn't it? Yes, Councillor Scanlon.
Sorry, it's just a follow-on, and through you, Mr Mayor, perhaps to the CEO. When I asked this question in an email, my memory serves me that you said that we couldn't, it had to be heard under the Local Government Act at the next council meeting after the annual meeting of legislators, or the one after.
Yeah, and I think a follow-up question was whether we could have dealt with them through a special council meeting, which is what you spoke about, and we did as an executive think about that, but diligently we were able to get all of the responses for the motions done in a short period of time, and therefore that is why we're putting it up on block. But as the Mayor's indicated, if council wants to deal with it in a special council meeting and deal with them individually, then council can determine to do that.
So we can do that. So even if it's so that, because that is a decision on the annual meeting of electors made at this council meeting, so we can call a special meeting of council to be heard after the 14th, and that's within our legal right.
Yeah, councillors can call a special council meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr Mayor, to the CEO. So procedurally, what do we do then at the meeting on the 14th?
Deferral to a special council meeting. Yeah. My suggestion, you'd have to move a deferral of the whole items to a special council meeting.
Well, that's. I'm sorry, you preempted where I was going with this. So, you'd have to move a deferral to a special meeting of council.
Miss Albright, would that be correct? Given that it's already on the agenda.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. So, then another question would then be: it would up to be a councillor to move a deferral. And that councillor, in my opinion, couldn't be you. No. Okay. Right. And if that motion is lost, then it is dealt with as it is in the agenda. Thank you.
Any further questions, Ms Albright? No. Beautiful. That leaves us only the confidential items, Council, which what I'll do is I'll just leave them because myself and Councillor McCulloch have an interesting one on those. So I'll run through the agenda so far and indicate what withdrawals I have. So far, Councillor Podovnik has withdrawn 13.3, 3.1, 3.2. I have Councillor Lucas indicated on 5.5. I'll get to that in a minute, Councillor. Okay, so. And I think Councillor Podovnik also was, 13.3. So if I run down the list, Councillor indicate any withdrawals. 13.5 is the rates concession for the bushfire thing. 4.1 is the draft fauna policy. 4. You want to do an amendment on that one? 4.1, the draft fauna management policy. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the one.
And you wish to do?
An
amendment. 4.2 is the amendment for local planning scheme for further relocation of fauna. 4.3 is the extension of time on the Mash Brewery. 4.4 is the reclassification of landowner Crescent Curran Way. 4.8 is additions to the existing restaurant in Stirling Street, Guildford, the cafe. Councillor Johnson?
Yep.
To do?
To be determined, Mr Mayor.
To be determined.
I'll have an alternative motion, but I'll advise you.
You don't know what you want to do with it, okay.
I've got a good idea, but I haven't formulated it yet, Mr Mayor.
4.11 is short stay accommodation in Brigadoon. 4.12, the change of use of shop, Clayton Street, Bellevue. Because they're on another page, Councillor, I can get back to them. They're on the other side, so don't panic, I will get to them. Don't panic. You know, I don't have it all listed on one page, the others are on a withdrawn page. 4.15, the Blue Gum Road group dwelling. 4.18, patio addition to Tavern, Great Northern Highway, Middle Swan. Sorry, I missed one there. 4.17 is the timber decking and outdoor at Great Northern Highway, Herne Hill. 4.19, additions to existing cabin or chalet, John Street, Henley Brook. Where are we now? 4.20, statutory planning and delegated authority. That one. 5.1 is construction of footpath, Talbot Road. 5.3, closure of Adelaide Street, Waterhall, Guildford. I'll just skip one back. 5.2, the proposed closure of lot 66, Harper Street, Woodbridge. 5.4, the proposed maintenance of buildings, Junction Parade, Midland. 5.6, bridge replacement, Belladura. Then there's the financial report, 6.1, 6.2, budget adjustments, 6.3, list of accounts paid. 7.1 is the recruitment, CEO recruitment, performance review and termination standards policies. Okay, then we've got the notice of motion. 4.5 is the Bellevue land use study review. You're going to draw that one. To do what, Councillor? 4.6 is a Brabham second stage structure plan.
Yes, I'll do something of that, Mr Mayor. An amendment,
Councillor
please.
Perry, you're going to do what?
An amendment.
Amendment.
Mr. Mayor.
And Councillor Catalano, you had your hand up as well? An amendment as well? Yeah, might be a good idea to talk to each other. Yeah, some of the page numbers on this sheet have been all over the place. 4.7 is the additions to the microbrewery, restaurant and shop, West Swan Road, Henley Brook. Councillor Zanino to do. 4.9 is the telephone infrastructure, Belladura. 4.10 is the extension of the aged care facility in Middle Swan. Right, so you can do some homework on that one tomorrow. 4.13 is the amendment to town planning scheme for the telecommunications infrastructure at the Vines. Alternate, yeah, I'll get your hand up, yeah. For an alternate motion. And Councillor Anders, you had your hand up as well. Are you going to talk to each other on this one? Yep. Okay. 4.14 is a change of use from the restaurant, food and beverage reception and function centre at Great Northern Highway, Herne Hill. 4.16 is the single house and driveway, Dulcify Court, Brigadoon. 5.5 is the petition, the slip lane for Kiara, and Councillor Lucas has withdrawn that one. And then there's 8.1, which is the annual electors meeting. Councillor Scanlon. I don't think I need to ask what that's for. And then there's Councillor Kiley's notice of motion. Okay, so that takes care of all of those. This will be the red folder I prepared earlier, so not yet, just about to do that now, Councillor. So we need to switch off. Dealer, please.